Okay, we're going to go ahead and call this work session for the Orem City Planning Commission to order at 4:34 PM on April 2nd in the Orem City Council chambers. And we're going to just dive into working on the general plan, and the plan today is just to work until we're done and satisfied. Get through the introduction and land use is, I think, what we're focusing on. Jared?
Great. I was gonna say, if you guys want to set, I didn't plan on, we didn't have like a stop time or anything like that. If you want to plan a stop time, we can say that. We can say 6:30 or whatever you guys want to do. You can take a break and have dinner, whatever you want. It is super cash, your meeting, so we'll go as long as you want.
Okay. Okay. All right, go ahead.
Okay. We'll go ahead and get started. The only item on the agenda is the general plan update that we wanted to talk about. We've got the land use element to talk about tonight, but we also have anything left from the introduction that we want to make as adjustments. Just a real quick point of order. The continue, if you have comments for us for that, I can re-establish those, get those in there. We can go through those tonight too. We didn't get to finish the whole big section because there was lots to read there, and you guys wanted to read that before we made any comments. So if you have those, we can talk about those. But then also an update on sharing the draft. IT is going to give me permission to share the document externally to you guys, but it was kind of a challenge to get them to say yes, that we could have comments coming in from outside sources because it's an internal drive, that Google Drive. So they are giving me permission to do that. So after this meeting tonight, I'll be able to share the documents with you as editable and commentable documents. So that'll be good because then we can keep things moving in real time better anyway. So that's the update there. It took a couple of weeks to get that permission, but we've got it now, so we'll be able to do it. And then did you all have comments about the introduction that we should go through? Or additional ones? Mike's got some.
I've got some.
All right.
But we can start, Mike. No, start. Oh
I've
dear.
got the intro.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Sure.
Yes.
May I ask a question about the colors? So we've
Oh,
got
sure.
kind of a magenta color, a
That's
green color, and there's some line outs.
Let me pull it up, Rod. I'm sorry, 1 second.
No problem. Just want
Mike.
to track the significance or lack of significance of the colors is all from my own
It's
mind.
different commenters. So,
Okay, cool.
or where I've inserted, I think it was green and I can't remember.
I've
Or
made some
magenta.
modifications as Jared's asked me to make modifications. I mean, if we had more editors, there'd probably be more colors.
It would be a full rainbow up there with,
Alright.
with as many editors as we might.
Yeah, for me, when I do colors, they mean something. I
Yep.
just wanted to make sure there wasn't
It's
some
just,
type of
it's
meaning.
just to
I-
differentiate who
okay.
inserted the comment.
Yep.
Yep. So if you've got additional comments, we've got the document up and we can talk about those and make sure we get everything the way you want it. At least in the intro section. Anybody want to go first?
You want me to go ahead? Some of it's just like wording.
Okay.
Where are you going?
Yeah, well, the first paragraph was fine. The second paragraph, there was a sentence about UVU that I wanted to invert the sentence, so it was a better
So
sentence.
in 1941, the Central Utah Vocational School was founded and would eventually become Utah Valley University with the state's
Yeah.
largest student population.
But kind of
Cool.
invert it and say, in 1941, the Central Utah Vocational School, oh, and you can see something, this is not perfect yet, but
Sure.
the school that would eventually become Utah Valley was founded.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we take out the state's largest population. I think it needs another sentence.
Okay,
Because it was a confusing sentence.
sure.
I've done enough editing that I'm like, that.
Yeah, something like
is
now, UVU now is the state's largest
School.
by student population or
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
let's emphasize that because that is a really important.
It is.
Part of
that,
UVU.
yeah, significant to our,
So-
other.
And actually, not that it matters, but it wasn't begun in Orem, it was begun in Provo. The campus was by BYU's campus,
Yeah, it was.
and then it was moved to Orem many
We
years
are-
later.
We are strategically omitting that part.
Okay, well,
Or
Well,
avoiding.
technically it was UTC too, back.
that's Utah Technical
UV's
College.
UVS.
I knew Wilson Sorensen, the guy that, I'm that old,
guy that's-
that founded it,
It's true. I worked at
great.
UVSC when
Yeah,
before.
that was-
yeah.
like
That's
the
what I
third or fourth iteration.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, but Utah Tech, that's what it was.
Okay.
I think they got $50,000 from the federal government to start
To
this.
start it during,
technical
yeah,
school.
as recovery, as part of the Recovery Act.
Yeah.
From-
You know these things.
Yeah.
Interesting. So
So
we'll,
I started at UVCC and then,
Utah Valley Community College.
yeah, and then it turned into UVS.
You were so brilliant, it became a university,
Yes,
right?
yeah. I worked in the CS department when they were working to become a state college.
Really?
Okay.
so we'll reorder that language a little bit to make
Yeah.
it more, and then separate the sentence.
Yeah. And then, does anyone, maybe just for clarification, anything else on that history overview, anything, comments?
I forgot my papers. I didn't really
Okay.
have much.
And I would add is that's the kind of summarized history. If there's any major elements of the expanded history that we will later address in the appendix.
Who
That would be-
wrote it in the first place? Do you know, was there a single author that,
That wrote the original history
the
of
one that is in this document?
that was
we
a
have?
combination of me and Jared and a little bit of help from our friend Gemini, as AI assistant.
Oh, really?
Trying
I
to
thought it
boil
was
down.
very interesting and,
But I was curious what AI would pull as, hey,
Yeah.
describe, but we pulled basically some of the current text and said, hey, can we summarize this down? And then we came back and modified it a little bit before we came to you previously when I was out of town. And then we've made some modifications since. But I was thinking for the expanded history, it would be interesting to hear from
Yeah.
all of you important expansions, further, deeper dive elements of that for later drafting for the expanded history section.
yeah, I thought it was really worthwhile and most interesting, actually.
It would
Having
be
lived here
interesting.
50 years.
Yeah. It would be interesting as we were talking about coming in to the meeting, the Historical Preservation Committee. It would be interesting to get their take on the written history thus far and maybe have them give us some condensed version of that that would serve better or
Without any
add to it if it's
question.
needed.
And we even have the benefit of the recent, well, not so far recent, but in a long, grander scheme things, recent centennial that the city celebrated. And there
Yeah.
was a book that was put together as part of that. And there's been other books that are Historic Commission. I'm the staff liaison for that. So I meet with them. They talk about, the historical preservation being architectural focus, but then also our focus historically of the city. And I think that would be interesting as they've pointed out there's a book called It Happened in Orem was published a few years ago that has some other Orem historical elements. Not that we have to replicate all of that body of knowledge and text in the general plan history. I think it's more interesting to talk about the general development of the city history, but also touch points of these major historical events,
Without any question. in my opinion.
elements that
Yeah.
affected that development of the
I mean,
city.
there's significant things that happened. I mean, the steel plant being built and then the homes that were built subsequent to that, and there's just a myriad of things that, and even edifices in the city. I don't know that we've really identified any of those. I mean, there are some old houses, but
There was a recent, sharing this with Madeline before the meeting. There was a recent survey done as part of UDOT's project with 1600 North, because they are buying and removing historically homes that could be historically registered. They have to do a basically mitigation of that. And so that survey was done of the Memo Gardens neighborhood. And it turns out that was developed by a famous Utah architect post-war. It's one of the most unique post-war subdivision in Utah. And so the survey guides the city to say, hey, we could consider this as a historic district in the future. And that was the recommendation we got from UDOT's architectural historian, is to take that further. So there's some other thing like that. That's an
well,
example of
you
some
look
other.
at the communities in Utah County. I mean, Lehigh's very old, has significant history, American Fork, Pleasant Grove, Provo, and then you kind of skip Orem and Linden, but it seems like we could identify some elements of Orem that are quite historic.
Absolutely. So I just want to put that kind of kernel in your
Yeah.
seed in your minds for think expansion for, send us some ideas for what you think should be included in the expanded history section of the appendix. that we can start kind of
I think it'd be
churning,
great,
getting,
yeah.
preparing that as well.
Okay, on the next section, structure of the plan, does anyone have any comments? I don't think we kind of talked through some of it and then that was some of the
Yeah.
changes.
We got a lot of those edits in. If there's no
Yeah.
additional ones, we'll just keep them.
There's one grammatical one, but I'll show it to you later because it's hard to explain.
Yeah, I think as we discuss those topics specifically, we'll have maybe
come
some
back.
additional elements we can add.
Okay, and then the next section is the key priority and strategies. This was the part we didn't focus on, so we could actually read it.
Right.
This is coming from the city council's annual,
They're
Goals?
they're pulled from the city council's areas of focus.
okay.
And how often is this updated in terms of their focus?
Their areas of focus. Those
Yeah.
areas of focus might be updated every year, but the ones that kind of, and it doesn't include all of them. The ones that kind of mesh with land use were the ones we pulled here. It seemed the best way to kind of align, if one of the goals is to align the general plan with the goals of the city, that seemed like a good way to start, to include those. And they work well as kind of initiatives or priorities. If we have additional ones, we can certainly do that. We're not bound to only those. We're bound to even keep all of those. It's just something that ought to be discussed. That's where we started.
I'm going to start the discussion because I'm skeptical of these. Not that they aren't important for us to know and they aren't important for us to use as guiding principles, but I guess I'm still trying to figure out why they belong in the general plan. If it's something that changes annually and like reading through them, I redlined it
Mhm.
because that's what I do. And I was like, some of it has to do with changing tense on some of the things and making them
Sure.
more active goals. And some of them, I'm like, I don't understand what this has to do with us and planning. So if maybe there's could be some elucidation on some of that, that would be helpful. But
Sure.
like, I mean, so, but in the first paragraph, I did have, before it starts, I did have one word that I wanted to see what other people thought about. Because it says down on the last line, it says, you know, stuff about Orem, but robust, sustainable public services and thoughtful urban design. Do we want urban design there or do we want suburban design? And I know
Suburban.
I know we generally talk in terms of urban and rural, but
Mhm.
like,
It-
it was one of those words that I flagged because I know it's a sensitive thing.
I think in this context, it doesn't really mean suburban or urban is not really the appropriate. I don't know that there's such a thing as suburban design.
I don't think
what
there
I'm
is
saying.
either.
Urban design means form, land form,
Yeah.
but it's a more elegant way to say it. I don't think it's trying to say thou shalt be urban. It's saying thoughtful urban design is what your built environment looks like. We could change it to built environment or
Built
something different.
environment
Or
might,
just thoughtful design.
thoughtful design.
Just scratch the
yeah.
word urban. See,
Yeah.
that works.
Or
Absolutely.
you could take it a step further and you say urban design is the specific design of places, streetscapes and what, you know, design that in et cetera.
I think though that when you
Thoughtful
say
design.
thoughtful design,
Yeah.
Thoughtful design could be
people,
that.
people know you mean the form of buildings and landscaping, et cetera, right? It seems natural as a fit.
Yeah.
Doesn't that leave it too wide open? Thoughtful design of what?
Yes, but that's the point. The point is to have we want this kind
Well,
of direction, but not to be specific
We're not
necessarily
trying to be
here.
the Swiss Alps.
Well, no, I'm not. I mean, to me, this isn't
Sure.
terribly significant. I mean, but you talk about transportation, water management, diverse housing options and so on. Design is just a catch-all, could catch all of those things above it, really, I guess. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
I don't
And
know. I'm good either way. Doesn't
And
matter
if
to me.
you are going to continue to have an urban design chapter or sub-chapter or whatever it turns
Yeah.
out to be,
Talk
that's where
about-
you could more specifically address
Yeah. that's-
that element and what the focus would be and the goals and you could prioritize certain types of design, et cetera.
Yeah.
I think,
Well, and that's a good point, because if we're gonna have a chapter called urban design, we need to call it out in the introduction. So if we don't call it out in the introduction, we need to change the urban design chapter.
We could call it something.
My
else.
writing,
that's a fair point.
or introduction matches the body of the paper.
But that's a good point.
a
And
good
when we
point.
get to that section and we know more kind of where we're headed, maybe the title changes and we make, as long as we make them match.
I'm just pointing it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I
that's
think
We
good.
can't
that's a valid
casually
point.
say, get rid of urban if we're gonna have chapter named urban.
Urban design. Yeah.
Good point.
I just know that urban can be a bit of a triggering word.
No,
Yeah.
I'm not
So-
gonna disagree with that.
Yeah.
I think we found that out last meeting, but
Yeah.
I think it's important that we state clearly what we think. And, you know, popular or no, we state what our plan for the city is.
Sure.
I think too, that from a plain language standpoint, or, avoiding maybe a more industry term as urban design could be, is another approach to plain language. And then we could further define elements of that in that chapter.
So let me just make a comment regarding, you've written this draft essentially. I mean, you've looked at it for quite some time and here, and I'm speaking for myself. So, I mean, I've had a cursory look at it, read it.
Sure.
But you live it day in and day out. So I would invite you to push back if you disagree.
Well, I think that the term urban design doesn't necessarily, like I said, doesn't necessarily denote urbanism. And Orem is a city, whether it's suburban or urban is really kind of beside the point when you use a term like urban design. But that's when professionals are using the term.
Yeah.
And we do want it to be plain language and not something that's understandable. So I'm sitting here thinking, and I'm just gonna do it in real time and that way I don't forget it. There might be other ways we can say what we mean without it being too weird. We could say thoughtful design, we could say thoughtful or attention to, or something like that, to architectural elements or elements of architecture or building design or something like that. There's a million ways we could maybe say it better
And
as we go forward.
And it's
We'll figure
at
that
the
out.
scale that the city wants to set goals for. Do we want to have thoughtful design in, like I said, what's all along in the streetscape, and you want tree lined streets? Do you want benches for people to sit on? How fine grained do we want to get that design approach to be? When you visit places, sometimes they have design details down to the colors, the types of pavers that they use, et cetera. So that could be obviously fleshed out in the chapter, but I think this introduction could summarize that maybe more broadly than just urban design.
I bet we can say it in more plain language than that in some other way. I'm not sure exactly what, but something might make it more descriptive for people reading it to know what we mean when we say design.
I'd just add that
Yeah.
the title of the chapter may become apparent after the chapter's finished. And just as a placeholder, we call it design, and take any charged language out of it for now. Typically, urban design is more about the space between buildings, not the actual architectural elements of buildings, although some codes do get that deep into it. I don't imagine Orem typically will
Orem
get
doesn't
that
have a-
deep into it.
Orem doesn't have a code regarding how the building looks.
Not typically. There are
cases.
some design standards for State Street now.
There's a home that's being built near Palisades by the
Yeah.
canal. Have you seen that home?
I've been sitting here thinking about it while we talk because I'm
Yeah,
charged
'cause
with
that-
looking at ways to not.
It
have
looks
flat
like
roofs
it
and
looks
3
like a
stories
hotel.
right now.
Somebody just had a piece of ground,
Yeah.
3 stories high,
Yeah,
flat roof, 35 feet.
and no
Does
feature
not
to the
fit in
walls.
neighborhood.
Have you seen it?
It's Just boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is unbelievable how that slipped past and was built.
It's
I
just.
know
it's
people that
allowed.
own
It's
a,
allowed.
It could,
Have you
you
seen
could
it?
have whole
I have not
neighborhoods full
seen
of
it,
right
Oh,
now.
but
it's-
it's allowed. I mean,
oh,
we don't have.
yeah, I thought you said it's allowed. It is loud, but
It
it's,
is loud.
and
No,
it
it
is
is
allowed
allowed.
as well.
That's an interesting point, and that goes with this kind of thing. We have not had controls, but maybe one of the objectives in that kind of chapter, in the design chapter that Matt's talking about, could be something to say, we need to finish and maintain and update regularly design standards, albeit you don't want to control people too much. It's. you
And
know,
there's
private
state
property
limits
rights.
on what we can do
But
too.
saying if you're a third
Those have
story, you
been
don't need to
changing.
do a flat
Yeah.
roof is a perfectly normal thing to
Right.
do, or
Hasten-
restrict things.
And I ought to clarify, I said the space
not gonna
between
happen.
buildings.
It's not gonna happen, no.
Okay.
Hasten wanted to say something like 5 minutes
Sure.
ago, and I
Oh,
keep
I'm
trying to break
sorry.
in. Hasten?
I'm
Good.
sorry we hurt your feelings. Really. We didn't mean to cut you off of what you're trying to say. But I mean, I saw your facial expression. I really apologize. So seriously, this was published in 2018.
Mhm.
And I know we're getting stuck in urban and design. It already says in here for the neighborhood that it needs to, while preserving the character of the existing neighborhood.
Mhm.
That's important. But what I'm noticing here on page, I don't see page numbers.
No
On the,
page numbers.
on the urban side, urban design of the Imagine Orem.
Oh,
There are
no.
three updated State Street design, existing section, updated standard, and updated standard with future transit. There's no page numbers here.
There isn't page numbers, are there?
There's a figure 3.2.
Is it
What-
in the urban section?
Yep, in the urban section.
Okay.
And I know, I don't want to jump ahead, but what I want to point out is maybe throw a little wrench in this mix here. The entire reason I got involved with the city politics is because of this page.
Where are we looking on this? I haven't
They'll
found it.
bring it up.
Is it?
Okay.
we're in
We're finding it.
3.2.
Section 3.2, one more, couple more
Ah,
down.
there it is.
Well,
Keep-
couple more
keep
down,
going.
down, yeah, here it is.
Yeah.
This one right here. So to be clear, this, I don't know how much of this is implemented right now, but the State Street Master Plan, the way it was rolled out and the way it was enforced is set to take a lot of properties from existing commercial landowners on State Street in order to accomplish the transit master plan they're trying to do.
Really?
When I sold one of my properties on State Street and the new owner tried to add a shed, he couldn't because he had to bring it up to code. And as cute as the word bring it up to code sounds, it was not electrical code. It was actually the State Street Master Plan code, which meant he had to give up 15 feet of the property I just sold him for it to comply with this proposed language. Then when I bought the new property, I faced the same issue where they tried to make the land legal non-conforming. So if we're gonna talk design and urban design, we need to talk about how much of the land are we trying to take away in order to accommodate future transit plan. That's important. That's the entire reason I walked in my entire immigration history. I came in and I talked for 6 minutes. They gave me double the time to tell them that what you guys trying to do with the legal non-conforming and with bringing up properties to code is theft. And they put a pause on it. They took 6 months to go talk to all the business owners, then new Mayor Brunst and the city council. They did find that that was pushed harder than it should. And we went into the fight to cancel it, and it was canceled. Now, if we're gonna do something else for the city, we better as heck not take any land from any property owners on State Street. I don't care what the future plans are for transit. Unless if you're gonna compensate them correctly for it and fairly, not by changing zones, not by adding new requirement and restrictions, not by having it in a future plan. And then what I was told was like, hey, that's not fair for my land. Like, oh yeah, but it's already passed. That's the city code now. What are you gonna do? I'll tell you what I'm gonna do, I'm sue the city. That's what I'm gonna do. Or get involved, or fund future councilmen, or run myself. So that's this here. I'm sorry, I'm a little triggered about
You're
this
okay.
image right
That's
here.
okay.
Apologize for that, because part of that bringing it up to code, for me, my business, bringing it up to code, the building, 10,000 square foot building, I paid upward to $2 million for, was in the back. To bring it up to code, if I want to do anything, I have to demolish it and bring it up to the front
Oh, my goodness.
and give them 15 feet. So my $2 million building, by the time I finished my economics, I was $4.5 million. That's only worth $2 million. Or sell it to the developer for $750, because at that time, high density was available. And that's when all the developers bought all the land on 800 North with 6 different LLC names, all based out of West Jordan, in order, because they knew that's what's gonna happen. So I'm just giving you a little bit of background on what's going on here. This is triggering because I spent an immense amount of money just to get to a place where everybody on State Street can have whatever zone they want. They don't have legal non-conforming anymore. That's, if we're gonna talk, I don't want us to get, I don't want our focus to get stuck on the word or what is it gonna look like. I want it to focus on property rights And what are we gonna do in conjunction with the transportation plan? Because again, I apologize for getting heated up because it took 7 years of my life.
Yeah, we need to know about this. I'm glad you shared that. That's very important.
So whatever that is, so that's why when they're saying we need to bring in old planning department employees into the planning commission,
Yeah,
I'm gonna throw a fork in it. Because that was the push at the time. Just to be clear.
And I think that's fair. And I think those are the kind of conversations we need to be having, because I think we keep having all these conversations in isolation. And I think this is the chance to say, no, this is what we want Orem to look like, and this is how we want it to be. And I think that that is what we need to be working towards.
And I'm not saying they're not gonna try to reverse it or change it once they replace people by those who can conform to their vision, especially after we heard one of the councilmen saying that we're not in line with their vision. All that BS that's already coming back after fighting it for 10 years.
yeah.
Nothing is set in stone, because obviously if the 2014 master plan was set in stone, we wouldn't have been able to reverse it.
Mhm.
But we have to be aware.
We do.
What will that do to the landowner and private property rights? I felt like it was taken away from me. And the other landowner sold it and went to American Fork, and we lost his tax revenue. Because he was like, you know what, I'm not gonna sit in the city. And guess what I did too? Before everything changed, I saw no way out. I honestly had no idea what the councilman would do. I'm so good for what they've done. I sold everything in Orem City, all my land. I'm in Lehigh now. Why? Because they're freaking friendly to me. And all my tax revenue is going to Lehigh, not to Orem City, and I live here.
And those are the things, as we talk through economics, as we talk through land use, even today, as we talk through the section we're specifically talking about, the design elements, those are the things we need to be thinking about. We need to be focusing on how do we make Orem, if we want, and that goes to some of these things that the council's goals. If we want to make this a tech center, incubator center, what do we need to do? What do we need to be
But-
zoning for? What do we need to be creating to
More
create,
freedom,
to invite that environment?
more freedom, more zoning to the same location to invite multiple different businesses. They don't have to be the same cookie cutter. And let's not fall into the stupidity that State Street is ugly. And everybody says this is ugliest State Street in the country. No, I'll take you somewhere. Have you been to Oklahoma? Come to my job sites. I'll show you state streets. Not just Oklahoma, other state, Missouri, Texas. I mean, every state has an ugly state street.
Do you think there's a movement afoot to push that again, to do what was done before? Or do you think that's died? You have no feel for
I
that?
have no, all I know is my biggest trigger was we need to change the planning commission because they're saying no to high density. That was the trigger. And the other trigger was if you don't get that land approved, which we just met last time, wait till the new council happens because we'll give it to you no matter what.
Oh, no, he smirked through the entire thing. I don't know if you watched his
I watched the whole thing. And he said that to
I did.
somebody else and over like, so those are the triggers that I have. Like they're just gonna play leverage and power politics and all the fun stuff that they've done before.
But I think that's part of our history too. I think we don't have a plan. We don't have a real, like our land use has been so loosey-goosey. Everything that's come before us has been, here's this property, this is what we want to be, rezone it to this.
How many PDs do we have in our city for?
55.
55.
55 in a
That
city
doesn't-
that has a population of 94,000, that is an 18.6 square miles with the highest density available. Like that's why, because we have that many PDs. And they want to, it's all fun and game and want to make it look pretty. We're going to have to keep it cool and gorgeous and urban. But we say, the city's been saying one thing and doing completely something different.
But that's my point. Like all it is everyone comes in and says, I want to do this with the land. And so they come before us, they make an argument and they say, no, we need houses, build this. But we aren't looking on a broader scale. We aren't looking, what does this mean for all of Orem? What is all of these aspects that we haven't had access to some of this
No,
information.
we were not allowed access. We're not
We-
given access purposely. So we don't think, we just follow a direction
they
that's
just-
been set before.
If somebody comes, we're supposed to approve the zoning change and then send it on. And that's why we're getting pushback from developers, because we've been a little more like, hey, let's break this because let's think about this. But I think some of that is coming directly out of this, that we don't have a plan.
I agree with you. I'm
Yeah.
just saying this page
I
here,
agree
I'm
with
just
you.
gonna X this
No,
hell out of this
it needs
page.
to go. There's like half of this that needs to go because it's directly tied to the State Street Master Plan.
Exactly.
That's why we're
So
here. So
this-
let's,
And I want to be able to go through it before my term ends.
Yeah.
Or I'm happy to come back and give opinion when my term ends, but because I know I can't, and that's okay. I'm not looking for a third
Third
term. But I'm just saying,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the idea is this, what we're looking at here.
Yeah.
Is a pseudo copy of the master plan.
It is.
2014 master plan, period.
So let's change that.
And
That starts right now.
And so if I can beat a dead horse,
Yeah.
that's why we need to say what we mean and be very clear about it.
Mm-hmm.
And if it triggers some people,
it will.
that's
I'll t-
life.
I'll tell you, it will trigger those who are still on in position since then, since
I
this was
marked
written.
it, like the people's names who's in there. There's 2 people from city staff that are still here. And I think McDonald and Spencer are the only ones on city council that are still the same as from when this was put.
Yeah,
into
their
place.
names are at the
And
first. Yeah.
How much, I mean, and I know this is just by the way, because there are few things were omitted till you showed up, by the way. So thank you. I'm so grateful for you. And so grateful for the entire new direction of how
Oh,
this
you're
is
great.
working. But how much of the citizen self, how much feedback have we received? Have we received any feedback
On this process?
on anything? This is like all of us here hearing what our neighbors want, looking at the old plan, talking to the councilman, and we're making decision for 94,000 people, how they're gonna live and how it's gonna be, without enough feedback. And here's when we get feedback, when we step on somebody's foot that has enough money to fight it. Sorry, that's just what happened with me.
Yeah, and technically there will be feedback on this process. There'll be feedback at the end. But I think that is a question too. At what point do we want some more public
Well,
input?
the whole narrative, really, reading this document, is feedback is welcomed, invited. We seek it, we want it. And I'm not sure the rubber meets the road. I mean, I'm not sure how you necessarily make that happen. We just live and assume that good decisions are made by those that govern the community.
That's the hope. We hope that during the process, so if we can open up the process enough while it's happening with the time frame of just the year and only staff without a consultant to work on it too. We have to just try to open up the process and say, it's always on the agenda. It's on the agenda basically every meeting from here until adoption. And when we have drafts that are a little more complete, we can sort of publish those on our website. We can try to make people aware of that.
Nobody
But
looks.
people don't.
Nobody looks.
Nobody
You
looks.
see how many
Yeah.
people actually vote out of 94,000 people?
Yeah,
Not
not many.
many.
Why do we have 18,000?
All the wrong people.
Yeah.
No. If that's the case, we wouldn't, that's not true. That's not true, but that's what
that's
we'd
less
like
than
you
a-
to think.
I know, I was gonna
Yeah.
say,
But it's true
well,
to some
out of those
extent.
94,000, how many
Those
are
are
over the
the
age of
agenda.
18? And then what percentage of those did they actually vote? And
But-
it's probably what, less than a third?
Yeah, so it's not, that it's effect, if we can adopt a framework that revolves around protecting property rights and freedom, that may appeal to the most.
Well, I think almost any code we do should not be retroactive. If you've got a
Your
business,
grandfather.
you should
Yeah.
be grandfathered in. You should be allowed to
Oh, yeah.
maintain your business and treat it like it was always there. You shouldn't say, hey, I'm sorry, but new code says you gotta give up
Well-
15 feet in front.
And
But that was the
even
State
though
Street
your
Master Plan.
business is on the sidewalk already.
Because
Yeah.
they wrote into it that there was a
Yeah.
10% trigger. If you made more than a
10%
10% change,
you have to.
whatever that was.
That was unfair.
And we are looking at that again, just, it's not related to this general plan update necessarily, but looking at State Street, Matt and Kathy are looking at that right now. How to make changes to that program that was put in place, the 10% triggers absolute compliance.
Yeah.
When did
And,
that?
and make it more iterative or make it more, what's the word I'm looking for, Matt?
more
Make it
legitimate?
more incremental, thank you. So that's being looked at right now. It's one of the things we're coming to, and it's a great point, because there's simple things that trigger this massive taking at the front.
When did the State Street Master Plan get approved? What
20
year?
2018,
It was starting 14, right?
20,
No, it was 2015.
somewhere in there,
I'm 2016 to Orem and it was already in
7
existence.
years ago, maybe?
So it's before this
Just before
document
this update.
was drafted.
And then this was updated and
That's why it
included.
was
That's why it's
drafted
in
into
there.
this, because it was.
Yeah, I can
in
see
place.
in
that.
place.
Okay.
So
So,
that's being looked at, that situation that Hasem described, that's
Most
being
of
looked
the
at to make it
mess
more
in this
sort of
country really started in 2014.
how it
So,
would be
yeah.
handled.
So
And
the,
we
mo-
can-
oh, sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. One of the ways that to involve people in it, we've talked about this, we don't have a solid plan to involve. We don't have public meetings planned other than the public hearings, except that when the draft is partial or solid enough, we could make it available and when it's gonna go to, before it goes to the public hearing, we could put things, and notice about it in like the utility billings that go out or something. Hey, the draft plan is available for comment on this, on the city's website. Come in and give us your comments about it before it goes to public hearing so we can try to adjust things then. We just have to get the draft ready in time to be able to do that.
You
So,
put it out in the monthly newsletter too.
yeah, it's a great idea.
Most people, if you're like me, don't even look at my utility bill.
Yeah,
I don't get, it's automatic.
there, a lot of them
No,
come
paperless,
online.
Paperless. I don't
Right.
want
I
it.
know,
I
It's
don't want
paperless
one.
and automatic. We
An
just
Automatic,
work out.
paperless, automatic payment. I'm out.
It's hard to get the word out because people, some things
Yeah.
people look
Based
at
on the
digitally, other things they
electronic
pull out of their
meters,
mail.
You probably will.
Grant?
So,
I think just remembering what you were talking about before the meeting is there's all these different committees that you would welcome an opportunity to engage with through this process as well, I think.
Good idea.
Though that may be very differing opinions about the substance of the plan, I think that's an opportunity to involve them. There are also residents who serve on a commission that they're interested in serving in
They're
that capacity.
community-minded people or they wouldn't be serving. So,
Yeah, so I think
Yeah.
that's maybe that's another layer of that.
Yeah.
gonna say,
As
there's
far as
least-
including,
Oh, sorry.
sorry, just as far as what Jared's saying is opening that up to the public or the commissions to come and,
Yeah.
I was gonna say, there's at least 5 commissions, right? We have transportation, we have historic, we have public, public works, we have Parks
Trans-
and Rec, and
yeah.
then there's.
resource.
Yeah,
And all that, again, I think this is throwing more wrenches in it. All that, we have to keep in consideration the ability to grow at all times so we don't become a dead city,
yep.
including transportation. How can we do that? There are,
You don't have to grow to thrive.
so
You just have to evolve to changes that happen.
well, redevelopment is part,
Yeah,
transportation is
but
part.
that doesn't mean grow.
No, well, how much more land do we have left?
Exactly.
That's-
That's my point. I
but
don't like
that-
the word growth because it implies destruction
I'm not,
when you're already built out. And
if you think
redevelopment
growth, if you
does
think,
not.
I meant economic growth,
Yeah,
not necessarily more people.
right.
Yeah.
But where is our threshold? Did we work from the space where we can't support more than this many people and go back down? I mean, how, do we have that data? The city of Orem, if it exceeds more than this many people, our infrastructure will not be able to support it without spending billions of dollars to make it better.
I think that's
That's a great
important to
question.
know.
It's a good to know. We don't have it because everybody says, like, the term growth comes in many
Yeah.
different, too many different segments. And if it's about, we need to increase our tax base by adding more people and taller building and more
Right.
per acre, that's a different thing than, we need to increase commercial revenue to add more economic growth.
Right,
So there are two different things. What direction are we taking?
right.
What's our max for our infrastructure, commercially and residentially? And once these two are kind of outlined, like, well, do we really want to hit the 100%?
Right,
Because as it sits with our current population, even with the whole new ideas like, oh, if you don't like State Street, take a side street. Well, I did, and guess what? It was busy.
Yeah.
It's already busy.
There's no side streets. that
There's no,
work.
like,
Yeah.
1,000 East, for heaven's sake, is backed up. So what are we doing? How are we gonna go about it? Is transit in place? And just keep in mind, I'm not, this is one of those things I have to deep dive into because I first lived in New York, Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island.
yeah,
Okay, so I see public transit being without it, there's no thriving in that section. But here, if you push more transit and less car ownership, it's not gonna happen. You're gonna have both. Because your bus is not gonna take a boat to Deer Creek. And they still wanna go hike. So we live in an area, we have to consider the area's
Mhm.
direction too. Where are we?
Yeah,
also-
I think you made a great point because, you know, like the governor's a great example with his multiple personalities. He talks about, we need more people, we need to grow, grow, grow. And then in the next sentence, we don't have enough water for the people who are here. and the things we
We're a
do.
net energy.
But we need to double our population so that they can have even less.
So more
just-
businesses can come.
Yeah,
We're a net energy importer. Utah State is a net energy importer right now. If we have, this is FedEx comes in and switches like Amazon to electric vehicle, we're gonna start having brownouts.
Yep.
That's how bad it is. So if we add more people, we're gonna have energy for them. Orem City buys from Rocky Mountain. It's talking from both sides of the mouth.
yeah.
And it's only helpful for certain things. I mean, I'm no pointing fingers, but certain sectors. And the rest of it,
Certain
he's gonna have to
investors.
deal with it.
Yeah.
He's gonna have to deal with it. That's not fair for the citizen that just want to go about their day,
Agreed.
but that citizen doesn't show up.
Yeah, and I want to go
because
back.
he's too busy.
I want to pull out something that you just said, like where are the statistics? That is something like Jared and I have been having an ongoing conversation today, kind of about this, that I think there's a lot of data and statistics that we need to have to make some of these decisions.
Correct.
I
I
think
was
that,
gonna,
because I flat out asked for something and he's like, that doesn't exist. And I'm like, how do you not know what the density in your city is? And I'm just using that as broad
It's
brush
just
comment.
not a number that we have yet.
It's
yeah.
just not a number.
We might be able to, I'll give
Yeah,
you the
and-
same answer.
yeah,
We
not
can-
getting
we
after
can
you.
maybe get it,
No,
but some of the thresholds that we're talking about now are maybe definable, but they're not limited to Orem's borders. Energy coming in, our grid in Orem is what it is, but it's Rocky Mountain Power's grid. Our issues with water are regional, not local to Orem, and we're going to have a water segment or we have a water chapter, but those are definable limits. There is a finite amount of water available for culinary consumption. So you could put a population number on it. What's always happening with people is they're saying, well, we got to plan for this kind of growth because you can project the population growth. You can project how many kids people are having and how many people come in from out of state. And you can say this is where we're going to be, but there is a number at which it's not any longer accommodatable, if that's a word.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, and that's a great thing to know.
Yeah.
It's a great thing because we look, when we had all those drought years, when they have extra water in it, and then they asked us to conserve, which is absolutely conserve.
Yeah.
Conservation has, again, two double-edged sword. One of them is for truthfulness and one of it's for control and adding more people, because if you use less, we can add 3 more heads.
that's right.
They're two different sides of it.
If you use less, we can keep watering the golf course.
So that,
But yeah,
Don't-
but I
don't
think
trigger
bringing this
me.
back,
Yes.
but I think we need that information so that whatever we're putting in here is backed up by facts, that
Correct.
we're not,
empirical evidence.
oh, this is what
want-
we feel and this
We
is what we
want
want.
empirical evidence.
So the charts in this manual, what the latest dates are like 2020, is that correct?
Well, there is available data from ACS, which is the American Community Survey, which is a byproduct of the Census Bureau. They produce annual smaller data sets, so they're
have to-
not considered as reliable.
Do you have to buy
So-
that, or is that readily available?
But we have been doing, they haven't been updated probably recently, but I've been doing projections, and we've basically designed an algorithm we use the 2020 census, so we use the census years as benchmarks. And then from there, we use our building permit data. And we use the previous year's population per household and vacancy rate for properties as modifiers. And that is giving us a kind of barometer of a population projection estimate for that year. And then we compare that with that ACS. The ACS is usually a year to 2 years behind because they can't produce it.
I'm impressed with the granular information that's in this, actually, and, but again, keeping it current,
It's out of date.
yeah, and trends change.
Yeah.
I mean, you see that,
Grant, did you get to say what you wanted to say?
Yeah, no, I was
Okay.
just saying, just on this point of what's available, that is something we have been producing. There are also other data sets we have tried to collate and gather from certain data set, but other data sets, yeah, that specific to how much land is available, how much infrastructure is going to take for the et cetera, we could probably produce that, but it takes some time.
It takes time.
Yeah,
It does.
for sure, but
Yeah.
I think that would be helpful. Sorry, guys.
Rod?
I'm going to be a bit naysayer. I don't think we're ever going to have all the data we'd like to have
Sure.
in the form that we would like to have it. We don't have time, we don't have money, we don't have the resources that can, because really you gather the data and then you have to have someone smart enough to analyze it. And anytime you get statistics, anyway, long story short, I think at some point we have to have an expectation that we'll do our best to get all the data, but then we're going to have to make some assumptions. And then in the plan, we need to say, here are our assumptions.
That's a good.
And this is what this plan is based on, A, B, C, D, E, F, G assumptions. If these things change, it may impact the plan.
I love that.
Yeah.
No, I agree with that.
I align with that.
But I just think we need to have more of this backed
No,
up
I
with
agree
real
with you.
information. That's,
I'm just agreeing.
yeah, but I agree with you.
At some point, we need to draw a line
Line.
though and say, okay.
Is there a chance we can also meet with the committees, transportation committee?
Yes,
Would you like
we
to
were
talk
talk-
to them about it.
Talking about that briefly before, that I was like, I really think they should come and talk to us.
Yeah.
We should have, because we can either go to one of their meetings, we can get invited to theirs.
We
We
met
met
with
with
them once.
transportation once, but we haven't met with some of the other ones
Yeah.
before. Or they could come and talk to us when we're doing their section.
Could we also address conflict of interest?
I don't know if that covers it on our land in this, but, or
Well,
you
it
mean,
just, if you sit and UDOT is board,
Yeah.
you
That's
should
right.
not have a local position. Because that will advance UDOT's agenda, whether you like it or not, because you
Does-
sit on that
does that
board. Or
exist-
something,
UTA?
or UTA, something.
it should be disclosed. I think it
They'll
should be
disclose or
disclosed.
not, I mean, something like.
Is that the case
Well,
right now? Someone on that
Energy,
board?
energy-wise,
Yeah.
a power company, I won't mention the name, down south,
That's one of
wanted to
theirs.
corner the power in the whole Hurricane St. George region. So they sent their COO to be a representative in Capitol Hill that introduced a bill that killed anybody else from going in and creating competition, and it passed. That's a conflict of interest.
There's lots of conflicts.
See, that should be also like, no, I'm
There's
sorry.
a lot
if
of
you-
those at the State House.
Oh my, I know. I've been dealing with it for the last
I know.
3 months. But that's the thing where they use a reason that is legitimate reason to get to pass a monopoly or to advance one area's
Interest,
agenda
yeah.
into the city municipality because they sit on that board. Those things are, I mean, I don't know, there's not law against it, there should be. Like, none of us should serve if all of us, if one of us works for a developer,
Yeah.
you shouldn't serve on the planning commission.
Yeah.
That's not right. That's not right for the employees
Yeah.
either. Because you'll be holding a hot potato,
Yeah.
don't know what to do.
So it's kind of an aside. I don't know if we can address it like,
sorry, we
I'm not
can't.
sure what you're asking in terms of
No.
inviting people to be here or in our general plan. But we are, us, even on the boards and commissions, we have the same responsibility, ethical responsibility as our city council does under state law. Like, we have to follow the ethics rules. And there's disclosure rules, and that's why we've talked with our bylaws and stuff specifically about some of those disclosure things, and that, yes, if you're a developer and and you have a stake, you should be saying that, and you should be out when we do any votes related to it. But in theory, everyone should be playing by those ethic rules, but that's beyond what we do on the planning commission, right?
Sadly,
I
the
don't-
law
I don't mean-
allows you
Yeah.
to ignore.
I didn't mean to go on a
No,
tangent.
no,
but
I know.
Definitely,
Yeah,
yeah,
Yeah.
this.
but I hear you. I agree with you that I think we have to be careful who we're listening to, and people should be disclosing.
Can you get on fixing that, Representative Sakar?
Yeah, no, Grant?
I just wanted to point out, I skipped ahead to this slide from Rod's comment.
Yes.
That one of the state requirements for the land use element is a statement of projections for and standards of population density and building intensity for the various state required land use element categories that they classify in the state code. So that is a requirement. That is what how we meet that requirement and what is available, obviously. But just to point that out, that was something that we wanted to, mention today.
Thank you.
And I guess to pull it back so we can actually get to land use, and those great discussions, is just the rest of this, the key priorities and strategies. If everyone had a chance to read those and had comments. Because like I said, I went through and like half of them, I was still like, I don't know what this has to do with what we're doing. So, or needed to be rephrased.
I think we generally
You just
just
took it.
put
I
this
know you
in
just
as
took it.
a first draft,
Draft,
kind of,
yeah.
hey, let's put this out there. We are totally open to, completely revising this section and obviously considering everything we've already talked about.
I
'Cause these-
just, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, these are the guiding, like, if we include these, then these are our guiding principles that we need. And even if we don't include them, if they're still the city council's principles, we need to be referring to them. What were we gonna say, Mike? And then Rod?
Oh, I was just gonna go over on a sentence here, just.
Rod, did you have something
Well,
short?
just a general question, because
Question?
some of these I actually like. So are there any ones that you have a specific objection to that are not agreeable to you?
Well, and I was thinking in terms of land use, but Mike can start and I can talk through a couple of them. Because I really didn't get rid of all of them. Some of them I just shortened a little bit, but
Okay,
That's not bad either. It's a general plan, not
Yeah,
a detailed
it's not a
plan.
detailed plan.
It's the first sentence, achievement of stabilized growth. I just didn't like the wording. Like you said, we're built out. It implies that we're growing. Sounds like we're growing. So I was thinking more of a preservation furtherance of development that promotes Orem City as a family city, USA,
Okay.
while maintaining current standards of living.
They've got to scroll down a little bit to be where you are, right? You're,
No, they're right
It's
up here.
there at the top.
oh, right there. Oh, okay. Got you.
Will you say it again, Mike, the way you were?
The preservation and furtherance of development instead of around so around the preservation and furtherance of development.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think having stabilized growth also since, I mean, this is probably me being a little lawyerish, but stabilized growth make it sound like we just want to keep it the same as
Yeah.
opposed to we want to economically develop and
Yeah,
redevelop our
sure.
city.
Great. I like
But
that.
after USA, I'd like while maintaining current standards of living. Because we could really, within that factor, really, I mean, we might be able to at least upscale them, but we also might really downgrade them.
What about improving quality of living?
Do you want to say current standards of living or quality of life?
Quality of life, yeah, I mean,
Yeah. And I think I agree with what Britton just said on the same level, like if maintaining, maybe we want to change that to improving. So they're positive,
yeah,
forward moving words.
Because if proving,
exactly. I'm always, let's be more productive, but let's not downgrade,
Well, it's
Always
stabilizing
trying
is
to,
maintaining.
Britton, did you want to say?
yeah, I was just gonna say if the improvement of the quality of life of the residents of Orem is not the goal, then what are we doing?
Exactly.
Perfect.
Then I have one question on, what does this diverse housing options mean?
How
Where
far
was
down
that
are we on
one?
safe
Like
and
which,
livable?
oh, in that paragraph?
Yeah,
I don't think we defined it necessarily, but
We have diverse housing options. We can't ignore the fact that we have diverse housing options in Orem.
right. It says we'll promote the diverse, what does that mean?
Yeah. we
Promote
can
these
come back to
priorities
those.
with a focus on redevelopment, economic vitality, efficient transportation, water management, diverse housing options. the
I
promotion
mean,
of
because
our-
some of that's outside of our control too, because it's what people bring to us, how they want to use their property.
Sure. One of the things we wanted to make sure we included in this segment was the promotion of owner occupied housing. Figure
Yeah.
that's going to be a goal going forward. And that feels like a lead into it. Housing options, the promotion of owner occupied, because as people, as there are opportunities to try to further that goal, we want to do that, recognizing that there are lots of different,
types of housing.
So I guess
housing.
my point being is, should it be more descriptive in what we're going for so that I don't know.
We
Maybe,
can-
maybe it's fine. I just,
We can
What would
probably, I mean, you could probably remove, it's just a statement, we can remove diverse housing options, just have it go to promoter of owner occupied housing. Water management,
yeah, that I like.
that's not a problem.
Yeah.
We know
When
we're
people
talking
are
about housing.
when people own, they're invested in their communities and their cities. I recognize it's not always in the cards for everybody. But
Yeah.
that should be, it's the American dream. We should do everything to promote it.
Promotion of owner, okay, great. So then we just drop that part and say promotion of owner occupied housing. That's what we were trying to get to anyway.
And-
Perfect. Any others?
I
That's
mean,
all I had in that
that's all.
section.
Like I said, I went through and I was like, I don't know about this, and I rephrased this, and I don't want to go through necessarily. I think safe and livable neighborhoods is, I think we're all on board on that. Thriving and balanced business environments, we all think there should be stuff about that. Dependable infrastructure, we all go, I didn't understand why community-focused government needed to be a part of this, because let's
Well,
not.
and it may not need to be. It's one of their
Yeah.
areas of focus.
No, that
but-
was the one I just fully cut off, and then there were a couple of others.
I think I may have included that one just for through the lens of a general plan.
Yeah,
It can be a unifying vehicle to unify the vision of the community and the council and the residents.
yeah.
That's
Like-
that may have been the only reason
Yeah, like I just don't feel like that section necessarily on the whole, then I have a few other tiny
Belongs
ones,
as a-
whatever.
Yeah, so what if we just summarize it all into like singular bullet points for each one and say something like, in the context of everything we're trying to do, it is our goal and effort to align with the city council's goals and efforts through this period of time. This is their focus. We're gonna try and to align in the ways that is relevant. What if it's just like a catch-all, like
That's all.
contextual thing at the beginning?
And like I said, for me, I'd probably eliminate the whole thing because I'm still confused as to why this needs to be a part of it. Like I said, I think we need to know it as we're working through this, but on a yearly basis, I don't think anyone's gonna be coming back and updating it on a yearly basis.
They're not, but.
No,
But by
and-
the same token, if we were suggesting, if we were consultants and we were suggesting
Mhm.
that there should be some key priorities that a general plan have, these kind of fit.
And
Sustainable, thriving and balanced businesses and safe and livable neighborhoods, like you said.
Yeah.
The one that may not fit as well is community-focused government.
that's the one as a whole, I don't think necessarily
I
fits.
see why they want it as one of their areas of focus, and it makes sense. We're going to do it, whether it's in the general plan or not.
You
we
are.
can strike.
Right. That was the
I'm-
one. And then like on the first section, safe and livable neighbors, promote events to foster a sense of connectedness and engagement in the community. I don't think that's necessarily in our general plan. And enhance pedestrian connections, city center, Liberty Hall and City Park. I was like, I don't know if that one really is directly what we're involved in.
Yeah, I can see that.
Under thriving businesses, it's like seeking opportunities to strengthen the Orem's business lines and streamline the business licensing application process. It's kind of like, I don't know if that really has anything to do with land use.
Yeah, some of those could be. removed.
So it's kind of some of those, and like they said, I was rephrasing some of them, so they're more active, like we're gonna
Yeah,
do
so-
dependable infrastructure by, and I can show you that later.
Yeah.
But, and then the only other one under dependable infrastructure, I was like, provide, oh no, that was just, I cut off the first part of something. Provide more effective connections to improve both the residential and business communities. I think that that's a vague
Mhm.
statement, but then the next sentence makes better sense. Supporting efforts to improve the connection and availability of trails. Public, and I think that's missing a word because I think it should be public transit. Because I was like, trails, public and active I know you're trying to put that active
Yeah,
in public,
transit.
but it doesn't read.
What is this active transport all about?
Active transportation's trails, walking, anything your body can do.
Yeah, we already have trails and then active
Yeah.
transportation,
So-
so
And
it's
I don't,
redundant.
yeah, so there's some of those like smaller, like grammatical, like cleanup things that we need to do that I don't think we need to spend time on. But I can talk to you about that one afterwards, but it just,
Or if once Jared shares it, you could add it as a comment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Either way,
That would be great.
Rod?
So I just have one request.
Go ahead.
However, this shapes out, gets cuts back. I really like that bullet under the dependable infrastructure that we're prioritizing our transportation requirements
Yeah.
over pass-through.
I love that one.
Mm-hmm,
So I would like to keep that
mm-hmm.
in some form somewhere. Maybe we could put it neon lights if it's online.
That one?
Is that a bullet already?
It's
I'm
the
sorry.
first bullet under development, dependable infrastructure.
Support timely updates. Oh, I see. Prioritizing traffic solutions for.
Yeah,
Hours.
Existing neighbors, but rather than for pass-through commuters,
yeah,
like BYU or whatever. I
Like
mean,
Provo.
like promo.
I think that should be clearly stated.
Yeah, if they're gonna continue to develop poorly, then that's their problem. We shouldn't re-architect our city to accommodate.
It will spill over though.
Yeah.
How did you change the wording of that? What did you?
Oh, he didn't.
He said he loved it.
He
I
liked
love
it.
it.
Oh,
I
Just
just wanted
wanted
to
to
I want to
add,
make sure it doesn't disappear.
okay.
Emphasize it, yeah, just make sure it's.
on that
marked.
one, I wanted to add ing to supporting and add an and between plan and prioritizing traffic. Like I said, there's some grammatical things that need to be fixed,
Sure.
but that's beside our conversation right now.
Second to last bullet point. This one always bugs me, and we had this big discussion about water use. I don't think it should say continue efforts to reduce. It should say something responsibly use water. Cause I think in general, the people of the state are quite responsible in their use, and they don't need to use less. I think that the cities and states need to be more mindful in their development and growth.
And we will talk about that extensively
Yeah.
when we do the water use section. But I agree with you that there's, and I think there's some of these we can come back to again as we work through other sections to make these look,
Maybe use
More.
instead of consumption.
I think we made that change in the earlier part of the document too. We said consumption or change it to use or by.
Yeah, cause that covers all your usages, not just your drink.
yep.
Okay.
I wanted,
So,
I mentioned it to you.
and I know it's on the water use, but just to keep this in our mind when we get to
Yeah.
it, sometimes the economics are used as lever to induce conservation.
Yeah,
So, and I know the city council did reduce the cost of water at some point, but we also want to balance what does that look like? Because we may protect it from one area, but it's exposed in the other side. And I don't know if we can talk about economics into the water use section, because we, who controls setting the water prices in Orem? Who controls the economics of that? It's the council,
Scandal.
the city council, but we just have to be mindful of the economic example. We can say in a big city like New York, instead of saying we need to reduce the amount of cars going through the neighborhood for the wealthy, they just said we're going to add congestion fees
yeah,
if you drive through. So it's,
yeah. You have a commuter lane that the rich can buy licenses for.
well, well, that was supposed to be for more people to save, like to save on trips,
Uh-huh.
but the Easy Pass came through,
Yeah,
and that's an income generating thing that we're dealing with as our company across the whole country. So we just want to be mindful of the economic piece as we talk about the conservation piece, whether in any facet, in anything we do.
Absolutely.
Any-
Absolutely. Good point.
Any further questions on the section before we move on?
yes. I want
Oh, you had another?
60%. Why is it so low?
That's what city council gave us.
60% is a 30% increase. The current
I know.
rental rate in the city is about 37%, which is slightly higher than the national average, which is 34%. In basic terms, most people think single-family homes are more owner-occupied than they are.
That's true.
Rental populations are larger than you realize in most cases.
Yeah.
60-40 is a pretty good split. 60-40 is a pretty typical split the other direction. If you could turn that on its head and get to 60-40 owner-occupied, that'd be a feat. So I think it's a pretty reasonable goal.
Okay, then I did have one, I was thinking in that section, something about regulating business style tenements to ensure quality and proper standards,
Get me back to where I should be here.
safe and livable neighborhoods.
Safe and livable. Okay.
We have something short-term rentals, something along that venue when you got big style tenements that,
Mhm.
you know, they generally turn into slumlord type things because there's no regulation around them because they treat them like houses.
Yeah.
But it's really a long stay hotel. If we treated it more like a hotel, then we would require fire inspections and stuff on a regular basis.
Mhm.
And that's what Vegas did.
Because it's a business, we should.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Because these landlords are, have an obligation that they're not being required to meet.
so I owned a property in Vegas that was a VRBO,
Mhm.
and it was a very loose requirement at the time, and then just one letter changed everything. I had to be treated as a hotel. And I had to have an exit plan for
Yeah.
people living in there, fire extinguisher in place. Additional thing that made the economics a little bit more difficult.
Right.
So I ended up just avoiding the whole thing altogether
Yeah.
and selling it.
See, and that's not what I'm talking. I don't want to go to the extreme where
No,
people
I'm
are,
with you, but
are
it
going
is,
down the toilet because we ratchet up so much.
yes.
But I think you got to start somewhere where you got certain regulations where, yeah,
I-
if you're not me, like I've been past some of these fourplexes, some of these old tenements where the old infrastructure to get out of the building's rotting and rusting.
Yeah.
Nobody's making them fix it because it's a house in our mind,
I was
but
gonna
it's
say,
really a business.
have you seen some of the apartments by UVU? I
Yeah.
had to leave my child there for a week and I was like, it was
Yeah,
just
so
scary.
that's what I'm getting at. I mean, it's business. Sure, people live there, but it's business, and so the owners really have an obligation. To some degree.
Maybe designated the VRBO Airbnb short-term rental as a different designation than actual long-term rental. 'Cause the long-term rental they have a permit, that's
Yeah.
at $50 per year is what they charge, but,
Well,
and
the
then-
legal ones.
and the legal ones, yeah, that's a whole different topic.
Yeah.
You're
Well,
right.
that's why I wanted
Um,
it as a different section.
Yeah,
It's-
it would be good to address what a different section if that is, and we have over 1,000 of them. Like I've looked at VRBO and it said Orem City, all zip codes, how many
Yeah.
on VRBO's website or Airbnb's website, and it just came in 1,000 plus.
And the state legislature just changed the law back that you can now, if I'm correct, that you can now actually use the listings again to figure out
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
what's in the city. I thought it was one of the,
How,
land
how,
use things,
how do you
summary
do that
things.
and protecting private property's right to do whatever they want with their place?
Well, that's my point. It's really not private property anymore. It's a business.
I say,
Because you're making a fortune off people renting your property. So it's not like coming into your house and saying, you don't want to have, fire smoke detectors, that's fine. It's your house. But if you're renting something, it's a little different. If you don't want to fix your stairs coming out of your house because you don't have money, that's fine. But you can't expect
It's a
your
business,
renters to
yeah.
deal with a rotting staircase,
it's a great point.
I think it's a good
So
point.
that's all I'm getting at is they are a business. We far too often don't think of it that way. And that's why you get these degraded tenements is because they're just living off the rental.
Maybe
a lot
one
of time.
option, I think there's another city I'm aware of that they have the landlords have to relicense every so many years, and an inspection is done
Yeah.
as part of
If we-
that, and it's a random inspection, so they go and
And we do the same with regular businesses with,
Yeah.
I'm
we
like-
have the fire inspectors go through and make
but
sure.
yeah, for
everything's
new,
up to
I'm
code.
saying for
Well, if you have
for these rental units,
Yeah.
they'd have to relicense
Yeah.
and show
Yeah,
that the
so-
units
I
were up
agree
to
with you.
code.
I
Yeah.
think it's a great idea.
Is that a Utah city that you know? of?
Salt Lake City, to my knowledge, I think.
If you align the city's interest with revenue,
Yeah,
it's gonna work.
absolutely.
Like you have to inspect them once a year and it costs this much to go for the inspection. So the city's just not paying for it out of pocket for an employee.
Yeah.
And it has to have a margin of sort that's fair. And
Well, and I was gonna say, that's what you have to do for, if you have a home-based
well, my business is
daycare.
always.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in a home-based daycare, they're coming into your private home because you're having a business and they check and make sure they rattle your fence and make sure the lock works. And
Yeah.
you pay for that every year. So why couldn't there be similar regulations on
I'll
rentals?
I'll give you an example. Section 8 housing.
Mhm.
Having a tenant from Section 8, actually Section 8 sends an inspector
Yeah,
to the house to make sure that that tenant is living in a safe environment.
yeah, it's just like HUD, right? If
Mhm.
you're
Yeah,
gonna
it
get
is.
a
Yeah.
loan for HUD, it has to meet certain requirements.
So if the
So-
government does it,
Yeah.
why shouldn't another city
Yeah,
government do it?
so I think it's something, and it makes sure the city stays in good standards. Because we're
And
making
that's-
sure
that's not
these
gonna
tenements
deter
are
anybody from
staying
doing it.
upscale and so
We
people keep
do-
wanting to rent them.
I was gonna say,
We do
Jared,
license large apartment complexes like that, and there are inspections. I don't know that I don't know that the building department ever goes back out against. That would be different, and we'd have to add a fee and stuff. We can look at that. Fire department is on a rotating schedule to inspect all those kinds of places.
But
on the
those
business
inspections
license.
are free.
Yeah, we don't charge for those.
Why?
It's a good question. Maybe we should. That's something that can be brought up. The fire department, I'm not sure. I shouldn't say they don't charge. I don't know what they do when they do their annual. I don't think they
charge
get
for
them
the
annually.
business ones, I know that.
The
but-
business
Not
ones
for the
do have
yearly,
that built
not
in.
for the first one, there's a fee for the permit and coming to make sure that the pass you off as a passing business to start
Yeah.
work to start, but the yearly, just to come in and look at the fire hydrants and the fire.
I don't know
extinguishers
if
and
they
all that.
charge for that.
They don't charge for
Yeah.
that. And that's, to me, I'm looking at them like, you're on the clock, making sure people are safe, but that's coming out of a budget of
Yeah,
some sort.
yeah.
How, is that collected, is that a line item in the taxes? Is that a line item in the,
I couldn't tell
we
you.
don't know.
I don't know that. Yeah.
Britton would like us, but moment
Yeah,
to
sorry,
speak.
Britton. My bad, that's on me now.
I think if we're gonna, I like all these ideas. I think it's important to consider the fire department's bandwidth too. I mean, let's get their insights and see, hey, can you handle another, 1,500 to 3,000 homes to do a year?
If you
If you're
charge for
charging,
it,
you can pay for it.
you can pay for additional people for sure. And that should not just leave them at cost.
I think that's been Hason's point, right? Is the citizens shouldn't be shouldering all the expense of that.
No,
because
if it's
it
a
is
business, it shouldn't be the citizens shouldering the cost of the
Yeah.
the fire marshal going into every business. For the renewal, like that comes out of all the citizens. But it's a business, it's a revenue generating business.
Yeah.
Jared?
That's a great point. Let me draw a circle
Jared, then
around
Ron.
from one end to the other on this, because I think it's a good point, and it's a segue into why we have a general plan and why we need some things that are lacking in the current one. This would be an objective or a goal in one of the segments, whether it's safe and livable neighborhoods or housing in that segment, or even in economics.
Economics.
It could be too, that we should, and it's not, to your point about bandwidth, Britton, thank you. I appreciate it, because I don't have the bandwidth to do any of that or to generate some of the statistics that we want. But this is our moment in this year that we're trying to get this done, to state those goals and then put those kinds of, put that bandwidth together, or find out what we can do. Or, so the stated goal would be something like Mike's talking about, annual inspections and having those paid for out of the business that's running it, the apartment business or the STR or whatever it is. Those could be looked into, and that should be a goal. That's perfect. That's exactly the kind of thing we need to define in this plan.
Okay, Rod?
Great.
It's kind of connected. This just happens to be a burr in my saddle that you just made me sit on. There's gonna have to be some political will to start enforcing codes.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm talking about neighborhoods, yards and fences and what, they have two people in the enforcement team,
2 or 3, yeah.
and putting a big sign, Family City USA, is like putting a lipstick on a pig if some of our neighborhoods are looking like ghettos.
Food trucks too.
Yeah.
We talked about that, 6 months ago?
So just,
It's a good,
And I think that's a good thing, and I'll continue hasten just a sec. I think it's a good thing to pull into our next section, which is land use, because I think some of what we're talking about, some of the things that I know you've brought up as concerns, because I've been pondering this today in relations to some of the other discussions, is that I think that some of the things you would like addressed are things we could work into here and make new standards and figure out what we really want our neighborhoods to be. Because if we're Family City USA and our neighborhoods are our most important things, then what are we really doing to support and revitalize and to help our neighborhoods? Hasten?
Another tough balancing act, because we don't want to be a big HOA,
No.
yeah,
a city HOA.
yeah.
But there are parts of the government that don't have budget and their income comes from penalties and fees, but that also incentivizes them to penalize citizens that may not have the budget, which caused more turmoil. And then the budget added as a line item from everybody to chip in and to help those areas. I don't know if there's a solution to that.
yeah,
I
but
don't, but it's legit. It needs to be addressed.
yeah, because I have issues with some of the condition of the properties, in my general vicinity, causing my property values to drop. That's money out of my pocket. So I think back to your point about property owners, they have rights too. So we have, I know it's not an easy thing, but we got to swing the pendulum back the other way a little bit.
I was gonna say, I was in Cleveland in the early 2000s, and Cleveland was trying, I mean, it was blighted. Everything was blighted. And they were trying very hard to figure out what to do. And one of the things that I spent the summer I externed in the legal department, I spent a lot of time in their zoning enforcement. They had a whole court just for zoning enforcement trying to go around the city trying to do it. And it wasn't about throwing people in jail until they like really couldn't get them to comply, but trying to get them to work with them to do with that. And I know we have some level of that. Rebecca's not here because that was her background. But I know we have some level of that in the city, but I think but we also need to create laws because, and Rebecca will tell this to you, is that the problem is they have to enforce what's in our code. And if our code doesn't do what we want it to, then it's useless. And that it's that cycle. And I think a lot of these conversations we're having comes back to, we need to set what we want in
Right.
here. And we're probably gonna have to spend next year updating our code to start and creating some of these things that we want. So we're trying to create the skeleton and then we'll put the flesh on it through some of these other,
Code review. would
but
be a good
yeah.
thing.
Mhm.
Did you want to say something?
Oh, no, just
Sorry.
go ahead. That's exactly probably what's going to happen. And there are some groups, there are community reinvestment corporations that will provide low or no interest loans for people to re-roof, people on fixed incomes or that qualify income-wise to re-roof their house or paint their house. There are programs that we could explore, kind of trying to help with that situation. It may not be
We
the
need to
city coming
promote
and being a
those.
big HOA, but I'd rather provide people opportunities to do better than hit them.
Yes, I agree. I agree with you.
And we can explore that and try to up our game with that. I don't think
What
we
I-
do a
what
lot
I-
of that yet.
What I wanted to know is city budget. We've never, ever had somebody come and tell us we have this much surplus, this what we could use it for.
Yeah.
'Cause I understand there's a surplus in city budget right now.
I don't have any idea.
Yeah.
So
I
there's no cross communication enough because in our head, we think maybe the city doesn't have enough money to do it and maybe we should just charge citizen for it, but that could also be overbearing. And how can you balance that?
Mhm.
There are ways those programs are a great idea, but how can we know what do we have access to? What do
Well-
the citizens have access
Yeah,
to?
that's. a
Let,
good
let
one.
me, let me ask this question. I know the LES Church helps in neighborhood
Yeah.
revitalizations.
Yeah.
I know they do it in Provo. One of my good friends is involved in Taylorsville,
Uh-huh.
and they do all sorts of things. They even bought a forklift to do all sorts of things with that. Do you know if they do anything with Orem?
Don't know. I know
They
that
do.
that neighbor.
They do with
Is it the
Orem.
My-
What's the,
They
com-
got
what's it
things
called?
going in Geneva Heights.
They do
And
now.
they've
Okay.
actually, because I talked to Jim Barry, they've actually signed out different stakes to have a service Saturday. They're going in, painting, roofing,
Yeah.
whatever. And
The
they're getting
homes.
ready to do it with the Sharon Park neighborhood.
And
Yeah,
it's,
they
it's,
were-
it's
they
a
came to
program's
the
got a
city
name. I
council
can't
and
remember
did
the name.
a-
It's
It's
called
part of the My
presentation.
Hometown.
My
My
hometown.
My hometown. I was gonna
Yeah.
ask if it was part of
My
that. And
hometown.
that's, but I
Okay.
think that comes back, just to bring it back to what we're focused on here is I think it's the block grants and some of the things that exist on a federal and on a state level, or we could create on a city level, that I think they're those things that if we are pushing for those things to make them a bigger part of our plan, I think that will lead to hopefully getting more education, more people out there, more opportunities. And yes, I think we do need to talk about budget at some point.
Yeah, so one of my favorite examples years ago was Officer Bill Crook. I don't know if any of you remember Officer Crook here, who was a neighborhood preservation officer after finishing some terms in drug use and other areas of the city. He actually took it upon himself when he sees a house in need that doesn't have the means to do it. As a neighborhood preservation officer, he went and found the help for them.
Really?
That's awesome.
And it was a great example that for seeing replacing some washer and dryers, cleaning up front yards. And he went and asked community leaders in around this. So that could be a program we can train neighborhood preservation officers on, like, hey, you see this, you're the first line, you know who you talk to. And if it's a rental, then we need to talk to the landlord straight up
Yeah.
about that. If it's a
Was he one
business,
of the two
the business
people?
owner should, if it's a short-term rental or a business owner, the business has to handle it. There's no exception in that. Like if you don't have the means, why is it a business?
Right.
Yeah.
But
But was he one of the two people that did this? As I understand, there are two that do it.
they both did it together
But
at the time.
but-
That was
yeah.
6 years ago.
Ah,
But
Yeah.
he was a great example of how
Yeah.
to handle large conflict, except for the one across from the baseball field, which is now resolved. Nobody could resolve that until late. I mean, he came to my business and told me I'm in violation of advertising streamers. And I'm like, wait. I have streamers. You're gonna penalize me, but the guy down in Larry Miller has him, and I'm not gonna remove him till he removes him. Or I'm gonna pay you $100 penalty per day. It is what it is. And he was so kind. And he received, by the way, proper training from the Orem City Police Department. They trained him on a book called Verbal Judo, and he recommended it to me after I asked him how. He was so kind. The second visit, him and Officer Carter, which they're both no longer with the city, I took big scissors and I took him off. And he explained what happened, what's going on with the city, the two different enforcement officers, one for states, Center Street North, and one Center Street South. And that was an issue at the time. It's no longer an issue. It's been changed. But he was so kind about explaining it in a way like, oh, well, that guy's a fantastic example to how you should do things. He's the one that got me involved in the Citizen Academy, and so there are good things, and I think it starts with training existing frontline officer, and neighborhood preservation should expand and should be trained in a way to handle things that would resolve it without having to figure out a lot of the hassles, charge somebody more, charge somebody less. People have the means, and they can be the segue to communicate with my town or any of those programs. That's it. And that will eliminate, if it eliminates 60-70% of it, we'll have no issues.
Another base of what you're talking about is redevelopment. And that's why I think we do need that redevelopment segment. We will be focusing on redevelopment. But at the heart of what a lot of, I think we do keep coming back to is that what we say over and over again, Orem's built out. What are we going to do? Well, the best things we can do is let's preserve what we have. Let's build up everyone who lives here and make it a
Redevelopment
good
and-
city.
Redevelopment and reinvestment.
Reinvestment,
Yeah.
absolutely.
you.
Yeah.
So, okay, land use is technically what we should move on to.
Let's go
I have
back to
one
your
more
Discuss-
thing.
Oh, you
Oh,
won't,
wait,
I'm
one
so
more.
sorry.
Not moving on.
You said
Not
you
yet.
had no more and then
I did,
suddenly you're
in
like,
that section, you just keep jumping all over.
sorry.
I can't help it. You just want to go everywhere and
Mm,
not be directed.
okay, fine. What do you want?
I just, it's not a big thing in the thriving and balanced business environment. I just, I was looking at the bullet points. It's the bottom one.
Yep,
right
there we go.
there.
Sorry.
Up,
Oh, I passed
right
it again,
there.
right here.
We call it out in the section, but we didn't have a bullet point for prioritizing a diverse ecosystem of business and industry.
Mhm.
So we talk about it, but then it's not one of our bullet
Oh, I
points.
see.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
And, just this is a pet peeve of mine. The last bullet point that you have right now says will create, should say may,
Okay.
because you're forecasting a guarantee with will.
Oh, see, I changed that one to fostering connection with Utah Valley to create an environment of commercial innovation and all.
That works too, but just will acts as if it ensures, but
Yeah, I like to create.
that's fine too.
Will you accept that edit?
Yeah,
Yes.
All right.
like I
That
said,
way-
I just don't like the will.
And then we
because,
need to add a bullet. We want to add a bullet for, sorry,
prioritizing a diverse ecosystem of business and industry. It's, it follows we're known for is used car salesmen. We're just in a very, we're in a position where we're very fragile, right? Because if all of a sudden everybody wants new cars or we're buying flying cars, those used cars are no longer good and we're upended. So I think diverse,
gotcha.
prioritizing that diversity, it's covered in the top, but everything else is covered, but we bullet pointed everything. and
Right.
just
I
thought
like that. I mean, it was great.
it'd be
We'll
good.
do that.
Anything
Now I'm
else, Mike? Okay.
Okay.
I was just for the interest of time because it is in fact
For the interest of time,
6
really,
o'clock.
Good. Okay.
really.
I was trying to move on. Someone
the-
wanted to be
for
done
the
by 6
interest of
o'clock.
time.
We appreciate the edits. It's good. And
No.
this will let us finish out the intro section and
I know,
truly
we
move
have
on.
fun.
Okay.
It's all in love, my
It
friend.
is.
No, you're not.
So land use.
Okay, so thought we'd start with just the verbatim state code that addresses the land use element. And that's the text just straight from that 10-9A-403. And then I've just broken that out. So there's the text, and then I've broken that out to, so it says long-term goals to a proposed extent. So that means kind of what timeline are we thinking of? A lot of times general plans are, you know, a future date, Orem General Plan 2050, Orem General Plan 2040. You know, what is that extent we want to consider within these framework of goals and perspectives? And then it says a general distribution and location of land for the following categories. And so that is kind of what the state code, you know, asks for. You know, land use element that designates those locations and general distribution. So I just thought I'd list that out. We've called that out in some of the introduction areas. So, so then what categories do we currently use? From that list, what categories are we not using or considering? Or have we defined them differently? And then how do we match this up with the goals and state requirements? Do we redefine our current use or current definitions? And then as far as where in the city and designated locations, we have to consider, you know, that discussion of is the current designated location for some of these defined locations, you know, appropriate still? Is that the goal still? Is that for the time extent that we are going to set for this update? What does that look like? So these aren't just prompt questions, just to get that conversation going and let you all. Jared, if you have something.
If you'd like to, I don't know if this will help for the discussion or not, but if you'd like to, I have some slides that are just the broken down. We can look at the general plan itself, like, because we have that up, but I broke those land use categories into slides saying these are the residential ones and this is what it prescribes. Is that helpful, or do you want to just talk in generalities?
Yes, I think we should go through each of the categories, but I was wondering if you could flip back to that other slide that listed off like land use, agriculture, whatever. Because I did spend some time with our Matt, which thank you, Matt, for making these for us. These are the best. And it was really, my daughter was pouring over it with me going, oh, interesting. But like, I realized that on this, so this is what I'm holding up is our land use,
Future land use map.
future land use map. And it just says general broad categories. And they were so broad that I was like, because we now have a category for public facilities. Our parks aren't marked on there.
Right.
UVU should probably be its own designated little green blob on there.
Area,
Like,
yeah.
It's
like,
really not city anymore.
it's really not
state.
city. It's not ours. We don't have control. It's really professional facilities in terms of what we're trying to
Sure.
plan around neighborhoods. But yeah, I was thinking that some of these, like, it would be nice to know what our open space is, like be able to look at a map and say, this is our open space and we are planning to preserve this open space.
You bet.
Because that's kind of what we've run up against recently too. And so it would be nice to have a future land use map that corresponded with these categories a bit more.
I was thinking about that exact thing and thinking, and mapping is a difficult thing. It's time consuming and we only have the year, but there are some maps that would be helpful to see broken out by land use, open space that's left, et cetera. And there are some of those actually done for the State Street plan. So the data is 10 years old at this point, but they could be redone to show where the different, you know, land use categories, the actual land uses are occurring.
Where's our
That's a
agriculture?
lot of, an army of interns needs to do what we used to call a windshield survey. I don't know if people still say that anymore, but a windshield survey where you drive around and catalog the actual land use of properties as opposed to your zoning or your future land use map that doesn't really tell you that. So that's a big job, and I don't know that we have the time to do that. I think we have the will. I like to drive. I have no problem doing that. But time-wise, I don't think we could accomplish a true windshield survey. But that kind of mapping, we could extrapolate that data from 2015 or just at least show that to you. If you want to look at it, it's in there. But those maps are there.
Or Jared, if maybe that's a follow-up to what your proposal is. We finish this process of the update, and that's a secondary aspect of we now want to generate some more detailed maps and data that could contribute to zone, you know, ordinance amendments and change text amendments, et cetera.
But even the old data, yeah, is helpful to talk about land use distribution. What is our actual distribution of real land use as opposed to what we've planned or what we've hoped for, right? Is that what you're asking, Madeline?
Yeah, some combinations of those things,
Yeah.
yeah. But
So,
like,
hard to get, but
I mean, we have some of those things, like, and what is our agricultural land?
yeah,
What is left? That includes our orchards. That includes, you know, land that is being farmed. What is our open space that's not anything?
right. That's
How
just
much-
unused land, undeveloped, unused. Yeah.
Well, isn't the information in here quite accurate? I mean, I think it said
It's probably fairly accurate.
3% of Orem's land is agricultural.
It's
I think.
the
Probably
where.
still fairly accurate.
Yeah.
And
That's
we
part of
can,
my
we can
question tonight.
continue
Like
forward with that
Crandall's
data.
is residential.
Yeah. Well, because that's, yeah, the future land use map, it just is like, this is all low density residential.
Right.
You
And,
know?
and that's what I'm saying, Jim, is
Yeah.
that data is a little bit older at this
Yes.
point, and I'm not sure we can, with the time and the staff power that we have right now, I'm not sure we could really truly update that.
Yeah.
So we'd have to just rely on it as it is.
Yeah.
But that's worth doing.
But like
Makes
putting
sense.
our schools on here, putting our parks on here, I think some of that could be done.
Creating an area, a category
Yeah.
for them.
So that, yeah, so when,
And-
even with our future land use map, whatever it ends up looking like, you could still look at it and be like, oh, this makes sense that this is this because this is where the high school is. This
Right.
is where the junior high and elementary
And
school is.
we
this
don't
is
have a
where-
specific land use category for them. We have zoning. for
Yes,
those
we
things,
do.
I
The
think.
public facilities.
That's
Public
a-
facilities.
But
that's
it's a
what-
zone, so we
Right.
could create a land use that would match that so that
Yeah,
it's
it's
clear.
That's what I'm saying. I think some of those things we need to transfer into this section,
I
like,
agree.
because
Yeah.
they're on that list.
That's a good point.
And
Let
they're,
me-
and they're not used for residential.
Right,
Mhm.
So
right.
I
So
mean,
they show up
having
as
them in
residential.
yellow doesn't match because you couldn't just build a house there today.
Right. So they look on the land use map like it's residential, but it's taken and it's not residential.
It's not residential.
Quasi-public or
I
whatever.
think that was one of the reasons, other reasons as well, but for that public facilities zone creation, as far as
So I guess that's a first. We need to make sure we put
Yeah.
public facilities. And I think UVU could be its own under there. I think schools, parks, those would all be different types of public facilities that we have that they could be.
I thought it was interesting too, that recreation is separate from, it's its own category from
Yeah.
the state code. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we don't really do that either. We have, let me pull this up. If I have it there. That one. So right now, the land use classifications that we have are broken up into 4 parts. Residential has rural density residential, has the rural open space zone and the OS5 zone. And you can get up to 1 unit per acre in those zones. And that's kind of our open
OS5,
space.
That's 1 per 5 acres.
1 per
It's
5.
5
You
acres.
can go in the ROS up to
Yeah.
1.
I'm
Um,
just pointing out that's.
Yeah. And there's some interesting things in those zones, but the land use category for them is
Per
just
acre
rural
versus
density residential. It's not an
5.5
open
acres.
space zone. It's not an open space or agricultural category. It's just rural density residential. But that's kind of what its zone classifications let you know that that's really what it's doubling as. That's our open space land use
Okay.
category. That we don't really have one. It's rural density residential. Low density res is what you would expect. The PRD as low density is there listed out, R8, R12, and R20. And it doesn't actually show prescribed density that ought to exist in that category.
Our PRD standards don't really warrant PRDs
Yeah.
being in low density
Density.
at all.
Right, and I don't know why it's in
Changes
there,
we
but
need to
that's
make.
in there. But that's one of the
Yeah.
things we'd probably want to look at, maybe omitting and taking out of there.
that
Medium
is what's
density
on there.
residential right now
I
says high density PRDs, R6, R65, and R75, and says about 4 to 7 units to the acres, what ought to be appropriate there. High density residential has the SH, which is the student housing zone, and the PRD and PD zones with residential included. Again, not showing any density prescribed, so. It doesn't talk about parking, no. Not an issue in that, but it could be part of you could include parking or considerations of parking could be something you look at in your land use segments.
Would it be in
Absolutely.
land use or would it be in design?
It'd probably be in design, 100%.
But
Or
parking does
it could just be part of, if where you're really worried about parking is housing, you could just put it in housing and say, in this kind of high density residential, for example, this is the kind of parking standard that the city ought to pursue. Or look at, it's really not supposed to be specific in the land use.
Yep.
In the general plan, it should be goals or objectives. Try to ameliorate parking issues that arise from student housing or from I don't know how to word it, but that's the issue, is that so much parking occurs because of the way that Orem uses housing when students need that housing. So that's a long way to say that, but you all know what I mean.
Yeah, yes.
So how do we solve that? That's an absolutely appropriate goal or objective in the housing section, yeah. We're not quite to that section yet, but put a pin
I
in
think
that,
it's
'cause-
good to state that, parking is essential and a key thing that the city is considering, so that when developers come in, they say, oh,
Yeah.
what, they're
So you-
already calling out in the general plan.
that
Yeah, I
parking
need to
is an
Provide
issue.
enough parking.
That's
I
exactly
like-
what it should do.
That's a great idea. I definitely align with you on that. It's just,
Yeah.
it brings their attention to not just the land use, but be aware if you need something, you have to look at the other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And even though it'll come down the road, but it will save them a lot of money and time.
yeah. I
Figure it
mean,
out.
if you walk through the door and somebody says, don't forget parking, that's gonna stick with
Right.
you all the time,
and-
because,
And we will learn, we have made enough mistakes with parking in the city that we already know where to go.
And
Yeah.
this is also one of those areas where you have to be careful because the state just changed it again.
Mm.
And they'll probably keep changing the parking requirements
They may.
for and
What is it?
garages and some other
What was it
things.
changed to?
It's,
Trying to remember, I think they're allowing tandem parking now. I think
yeah,
there's
you're-
way they calculate, like they have set sizes for what parking stalls
we used to not
are.
allow tandem parking or back in front of parking, what do you want to say, too deep parking to count as two stalls. A lot of codes will call that one stall. We're supposed to count that as two now when we're talking about things like accessory dwelling units or multifamily parking standards. I'm not sure when the implementation is required or anything like that, so we'll have
Yeah.
to see how that
you
pans
can
out.
fix
But-
that.
Yeah, garages have to count as parking spots.
Yeah, we used to-
So you put the garage on the
Some
sidewalk, and
houses-
so there you go.
Yeah, some houses don't have to have garages. I know there was talk about that,
I'm
but I
not
can't
sure about
remember if
that
that
one. I
one
don't remember.
passed.
I
I know
don't know
there
if
was
that
talk
passed
about
or
it,
not.
but
A lot of
That's
codes
fair.
require a house to have a garage.
you
don't
can
get it
see
if
what
it's
I
not
do during the legislative session.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This
Couple
is a great, it's a great conversation, because that's exactly the kind of thing we need to, we want to, I think anyway, this is just me talking for myself now, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree, but talking about parking or having a statement about parking in the housing element, or even in the land use classification section where it calls out housing at first. Housing is one of our land use classifications. By the way, it'll be more elegantly said, kind of like what Mike was saying, but by the way, parking is a consideration in all of our housing situations. It's called out right at first. And that allows staff to then call back to that in our staff reports to you when a zone change comes up or a project comes up. We can refer back to that general plan and say, we've already called out or made mention of the fact that we want to make sure that housing doesn't become an issue for this area or in this situation. Does this plan that they're presenting really meet that? If not, then they need to go back to the drawing board on it. And we can refer back definitively to that general plan. And that just adds strength to your argument. That's what we want to be able to do, make it part of our daily routine.
Jason?
3 to 4 wrenches in this.
Yeah.
Um,
Good.
we don't, I mean, you've all been to BYU, seen the size of the stalls. I can't fit my car in it.
Nobody can.
And so that's something to consider as we're talking about it. Also, you've all seen BYU and university, as much as I love what's happening in university for the city. But I don't like the idea of counting all the parking by Costco to improve something at Al's. That's a big bag of parking. They're like, oh yeah, we have parking there, so we're gonna fill this up, but you have to approve it because we're all one PD.
Yeah, I think that's a zoning change we've wanted for some time, is that your
The-
parking has to be adjacent to your.
Yeah.
Yes,
Sure.
the other thing is, as we consider parking, is there a conversation to be had about ADUs on tiny homes?
ADUs would be under
Yeah.
housing.
Yeah, ADUs would be under housing option.
Oh, the-
Detached,
'Cause that
detached,
was-
Attached,
detached.
detached,
Detached.
Yeah.
because attached, we already covered it now,
Yeah.
it's covered really well, I think it's
And-
covered really well.
Are you saying you want them or discussion
Well,
about
discussion.
implementing them? Yeah,
Dis-
I want a
discussion.
discussion about implementing. I think there's something that have to be discussed. I think
There's
there's-
enough land out, there's enough homes with land out there that they could have a detached ADU for a family member.
Yep.
Yeah.
Given that you have enough parking and they're not encroaching on the neighborhood's character.
Yeah.
There is just, so just to,
Yeah.
And along with that,
Mother-in-law apartments,
yeah,
and what?
mother-in-law
apartments.
apartments.
Yeah, mother-in-law apartments, stuff like that, but in a way that's, we're ahead of the curve instead of
Yeah.
the crunch.
absolutely.
right? So we just have defined standards ahead of
I know
time.
my yard cannot handle a detached. I know that, even though there is enough parking, but there are people who have plenty of land and building, even getting one of those zip kits homes that can just be dropped in a foundation and the city can approve it with a nice permit that can eliminate
Yeah.
a few things and help.
I think that's a great discussion to have. I think we need to have, I think we do need to have it. There were some really interesting sections at the APA conference last fall about prefabbed homes and kind of the zip kit and those other kind of things and how the city can choose to do regulation and installation on those. And also how to use small pieces of land that we just have flag lots or you divide your lot and it has to meet these codes, but there are some of these properties that you probably could figure out for the same ways in like small houses next to it or figure out some other things along the same
It would
lines.
be a long discussion because
Yeah,
it may be, and if it's just for a small percentage of the housing, it may not be worth having.
Mhm.
But it's,
And we did have a preliminary analysis done through our consultant that aided with the stationary plan area. They said, hey, we can analyze some of the surrounding neighborhoods for a detached. And they basically said, is this percent, I can't remember the percentage off the top of my head, but this percentage of those properties could add this size of this standardized size unit. And so there's also, could there be exceptions so that more people could add that as an option, right? So
And I'm glad-
as far as
I'm glad-
private property rights,
Yeah.
hey, I want to be able to do this with my property. Is there an exception? Is there a process to discuss? Is this the part of that discussion for them to be more people to have that ability to access that option to use their property?
and I'm glad you brought the word consultant in another range because I've been through enough consultants coming in to collect data from everybody. And how can we work with consultants that don't have agenda?
Yeah.
Because that was a obvious, the questions that were asked did not address the needs we asked for and the answers that were received. They were handpicked answers to put you through the
agenda.
maze to where they need you to go.
Yeah,
It's certainly, that was my experience with the last couple of consultants. We came here in the city where we kept talking about specific items and we brought, they give us like, first graders, enough stickers, different colors, and you gotta put your sticker on the question they want you, and you only have 5 questions that they already put through, not your question.
Yeah.
And when you wanted to have your own question in there, it didn't get enough stickers, of course, to be a valid question, because you're the only one that had that question. And when the other people wanted to talk about it, it was after they arranged it from the most stickers to the lowest stickers, still wasn't working. And that completely derailed it was systematically done to get what they wanted to get out of it, and they did. And when I pointed it out, I was a bad guy,
Yeah.
which is fine.
Well, yeah. Okay.
Okay. Do you have something to respond to that? Sorry.
Oh, no, just there'll be no consultant on this because we don't have the budget for it. So.
Yeah,
you
so
don't
we're
have to
doing
worry
it.
about-
We're
you
doing
don't have
it.
to worry
We're the
about a
consultants.
consultant on this one. It's all just us.
Yeah, I was
So.
gonna say, we've talked about gross density and we've kind of had some of those discussions.
Yes.
I was wondering about maybe as we're working through some of these, deciding what we want per
Yeah.
acre,
I think
that-
that would be appropriate.
putting some of those in, because it's like, some of them have them, some of them don't, but I think that that's really important
It is.
part of the
I-
discussion.
it's
Has that
odd
been a
to me that
standard
some don't.
practice in any other city? Density per mile, per square mile?
Well, we were talking per acre, but
Unit per acre is pretty
Per acre,
typical for
yeah.
general plans. Yeah, usually it's listed like it is in in a couple of these. It's odd that it's not in all of them. I don't know why that's not the case. It's just, maybe they just dumped out because of the PRD and said, well, the PRD is so variable, how could we say? But that's, really, if you can still, even if you had some flexibility with PD zones and with PRD zones and things, and PDs allowing a mixing of uses even, you could still set boundaries and say, we don't feel like this particular category is going to be appropriated anything more than X. And that gives us a good callback again when we're reviewing projects and potential zone changes. So you guys know, if it's in this category, we don't want you to change it to this zone because that zone would allow more than we've said is okay in this category. That's what it's for. It should be listed. So, and that we've working with Matt, we've established a way of measuring talking about our density the way we want to talk about it. We should just apply those to here.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to have us as staff, we can, in the next couple of weeks, as we go to the next meeting, we can try to establish what those might be and throw them out as the first shot at it. And then you guys will just have to promise to go over them and say comfortable or uncomfortable and make things change.
But I think if we're going to use that as a standard, I think it should be brought into here as a standard.
And
So we're
stated.
all talking, and that the city council understands that same standard, because that came up when I was meeting with them a month or two ago, but like nobody really knows what these categories are. And and this is part of what I was talking to, emailing with Jared earlier today, was about what is the density and what are our real densities in our neighborhoods. Because we've slapped R8 over so many things. And if you get into the zoning map, it does say R6.5, R7, whatever, like it does say that in some areas, but what is the real density in a lot of these areas? And kind of trying to really say, what is it in our city?
And I think we can pull that out of the GIS data. It's just not something I can do, but I bet Matt and Grant could. So we'll see what we can do. And there's a GIS department that can work with them to do that. So we'll extrapolate that data. Absolutely. It'd be good to have. And then I think if it's cool, I would love for the statements, like as we start the residential category, we'll draft it to say residential is these are the residential categories. Here's how we calculate. Here's what we mean when we say density per acre. This is what we mean. So there's no question for us or developers or anybody. That makes sense. That's what you're saying, right? It ought to be clear and we've established it. Now we just got to state it in here.
In the
And
city of
nobody has
Orem,
any question.
this is how we do it. Any developer wants to come in, look and see, this is how we figure it
Right.
out.
So
So
there's
it's
no
not
question.
surprising when they come in and we're selling, like, no, you're telling us it's, because we've
Yeah.
had this. You're telling us it's this per acre and
Right.
we do the math and it's this per acre.
Well, we've got a thing that says this is how you
This is how
calculate
it
it. So
does.
use that when you're doing it. Otherwise, we're going to correct it. So
Same for parking.
Same for parking.
same for parking calcs. That a good point. Make that
Yeah.
note for when we get to that section. So that's very helpful, actually.
So is there any reason why we should have PRDs in a low density residential area?
I don't see any reason for it. No, if you describe, I'm being just blunt from the hip here. If you have a low density residential area and there's no density shown, but the presumed density at 4 to 7 units per acre and medium density would tell me that low density residential at 12,000 square foot lots and 8,000 square foot lots, you're not, if the purpose of the PRD is to do something other than that, then those aren't areas where you want that. So I don't know why it would be
An
that.
HOA would solve what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Right?
So there's no reason for it. I don't think. No, if you want to, now there's maybe some merit to saying, if you had let's say you have some acreage that's in a category like low density residential, and there's a nice pond on that property, there's some merit to saying, oh, well, if I use a PRD or I write a PD zone for it, I can cluster the units I would have had and keep the pond and not fill it in. Because otherwise, you're going to have a developer just fill in that pond and do his lots because he doesn't care about the pond. He cares about yield. So that's a different thing, though. That's clustered development, and that's allowed in the ROS zone, for example, that's there. You can
Right,
do
but
that,
it-
but you're 1
Both
acre
would be up
lots.
to the developer anyway, right? So
Right.
we wouldn't
Well-
get to decide whether he keeps his pond or not. We don't get to decide if he goes for a
Right.
PRD or a
We don't.
R8.
We don't, but they're also smart enough to know as a developer that that pond is an amenity that he could keep. Or
Right.
that slope that's nice is an amenity he could keep if he gets to use his land in another way. That might be the only reason that a PRD would be appropriate, but it doesn't necessarily have to be called out here to be appropriate. It could be an overlay or something like that. There's other ways to accomplish it
Right.
without calling it a PRD and doing it here. So,
All the PRDs we have, it seems to me if we're talking about a plan, goal and objectives, we really ought to start getting rid of the terminology that people have to go digging for and find.
sure.
And I think that is also part of what we define in here and what we want in our developments, and then fixing the code to match it, because we've heard a lot back that the city council members don't want PRDs. So why is it still in the books? Or how do we want PDs to actually work in the city? Do we even want PDs anymore? Like, we need to make them retired or whatever. Do we have any more preliminary discussion on residential?
These are good comments and questions that'll get us really a good start. So I'm happy
Okay.
for them. Thank you.
Commercial then?
So
Okay.
should we have a density on high density? I
Yeah,
think
we
so.
probably should.
Should have a limitation.
I would, just based on my experience with the city thus far, sure, absolutely. I don't know what it is, but but we'll
Well,
throw a number.
somebody came up with it. Gary mentioned there was a number.
Is there a number in there? I didn't see
Maybe
one.
not here, but it is in one of the books,
In-
because
Okay,
somebody was, I think it was during the Wilkerson Farm stuff,
sure.
said, well, what's high density? And they said, well, this.
Yeah.
Because actually on our books is high density, I think it was like 10 or 12 per acre.
It's probably between 10 and 20 per acre.
I think it was 12.
12, okay. So yeah, that's
20 is a lot. I mean,
20 is
that
a
goes
lot.
high rise and
a
But
lot
that's
of, a
also
lot of
stuff-
apartments.
Yeah, but that's where I think it's important that we clearly
Yeah.
define that in the general plan, that this is what Orem says.
It's what we consider high density.
Yeah.
And
But yeah, I think we should, because no density just implies you can do whatever you want.
right. And that's been the case. That's probably the case in these categories because they have the PR. Well, I'd say that, except that the PRD here is in this medium density, high density PRDs, but the most appropriate developments are between 4 and 7 units the acre. So even with a PRD, it's what I'm seeing is the city saying, even if you're doing a PRD, we're not going to go nuts here. Don't show us 45 or 50 units the acre in a PRD even.
Right.
Although there are limitations or there are questions when, like, for example, if you're a developer and you're trying to make a project pencil, you're not going to get, in a lot of cases, unless there's a significant existing commercial component, you're not going to get a parking garage built, structured parking built without 20, 30, 40 units the acre. Most of them say 40, but that's usually when they're kind of talking about weak sauce commercial too. Good solid commercial, you could probably do less. You might get to 20 to the acre, but you're probably going to be in that vicinity in that case. 12 probably won't get you there. Although it depends on again, it's density. It's if you're talking about a really significant commercial development that's already 10 acres of commercial and you're just adding some apartments to it, they're not going to feel as dense, but they're still going to be high rise. They're going to be 3 stories or something like that.
Yeah, so I'd like to see us come up with a number and
Yeah.
quantify it.
Grant?
I was just gonna point out too, I think along with no density, there is, my recollection was there was an element of, well, there's no density, but the design standards and height limits and setback limits also kind of
Contribute.
within the ordinance do provide some kind of cap or limit, just fundamentally, if they wanted to propose this height building, it has to be this much away from, existing residential nearby or nearby property lines, then that would also by default, by standards, bring the density, cap it as well. So that's something to consider as part of the code
Yeah.
amendment.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Jim, did you have a question?
No,
Okay.
I just,
I had a question just because for helping me understand like acreage, and I will be honest, this is some area that I don't always fully get, is that what is an R8? What on average is the number of houses per acre in an R8?
6.
6,
Three-
5?
It's
With
usually,
roads
it's
and
like
stuff.
3 to 4 per acre generally
All right?
in an RA.
and that
Yeah,
includes,
well-
that includes the road too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I only bring that up because the medium density says 4 to 7 units, but if on average an R8 is meeting that on average, the 4 units per acre, then that's just bad defining.
I think it's probably fairly accurate. That low density is going to be under that 4. It's
Under
going to be
that 4.
3.8 or whatever. That's probably fairly accurate.
I'm sorry, I round up. 3.8
you're-
houses
you're-
is 4 houses.
Good point.
No, I know what you're saying.
But doesn't that include the road as well? I mean, you're
We're
talking,
doing
you're
the net and
talking.
gross, but we want to define the gross. Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
How many,
Usually, most of the plots that are R8 are between 0.22 to 0.27 acres.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Because some of this goes back to what my point was, is that I think we need to actually look at our neighborhoods and see what our,
See what the real
Not
density
just
is.
that, but there are a lot of places that are zoned R8 lot sizes are actually a lot larger, and they do that so that they can build larger homes.
Mhm.
So they don't have an R, some
Yeah.
other R-year designation, so they can, you know, so they don't have setback issues.
Exactly. So
Mhm.
Closer together to houses, even though they're larger.
Larger, deeper lots.
yeah,
Okay.
straight to your point. Exactly.
Mhm.
That's, we ought to know that number too.
So,
Okay.
okay.
Any other questions on residential?
Nope.
This gives us a good place to start. You guys, I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Commercial.
Our commercial classifications are professional services, which includes the PO zone and the PD zone. It includes community commercial category, which includes the C1, which is, I forget the terminology for it, sorry. Oh, sorry, commercial non-retail, which I had never read before until this very day. The C2, which is commercial local, and then BP, business park, and PD commercials, planned developments that are commercial in nature. It also includes our regional commercial category, which is C2 again, the commercial local, C3, which didn't have a moniker after, and the highway services zone, the business park zone, and again, commercial PDs. So I think as we get further into the discussion of these things, it's fair to say or to consider that we may not have, or sorry, it's not out of bounds for a general plan to look at things and say, we should consider eliminating this zone or creating a new zone that does this or that. If we don't have in the zoning what's working for us, then the general plan is the time to say, hey, take the next couple of years and look at a different zone that would work better. If there's no reason to have C1, C2, and C3, then maybe we look at that now. And this could call that out and say we ought to consider different things. I don't
Do we
really
have
know.
any C1s?
I keep asking that question.
Commercial non-retails. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm not that familiar.
I think there's like
Do we have
one, I think there's three, if I
Let's see,
remember right.
Grace, where are they?
You have to see ones, usually you'll find it somewhere around industrial areas or right next to the freeway, you'll find some C1. So there's some.
I'm gonna look it up.
That's okay.
Okay. This is more on when we get to the.
Yeah.
Well, but I think
Super
this-
light industrial.
Well, yeah, and I think we need to look at both the commercial and the industrial and say, what do we need and what do we need where?
Yeah.
Because things have changed, right? If
Sure.
Vineyard builds out Utah City, does our industrial where it is in the state that it is make sense, or are there other things we need to discuss or fine grain down? But I feel like that with the commercial too. I think we need to, what? Oh, I was gonna say, just break this down into some smaller categories that are more defined as to what is in them, as opposed to C2 and C3, which is most of what we have, that are almost identical. Like if you look through what the uses are.
We should review those and
Yeah,
change that.
but I'm not for today's
No,
discussion, but I'm just
yes.
saying, I think we need to have some more
I-
fine grained
we could-
categories.
I
Do that
agree.
though, yeah.
I'd like to see some, I mentioned it last time, State and Orem Boulevard, we have acute lots that can be a problem for traffic. And so they really should be zoned appropriately to make sure that only the right things go on them so that they don't impact traffic in a negative way.
I do have a question too.
Yeah.
How much of Vineyard this development should we consider as we're talking about our zones?
I would disagree. I think we can't ignore, because if they redevelop all of this,
Mhm.
our industrial, we have some regional commercial and like commercial stuff here, and then we have industrial straight down Geneva.
Mhm.
And that all impacts. And what are we gonna do? Are we gonna leave money on, because that's where we could have some real economic pull if all those people are having to come to I-15
On tech or job.
or
creation.
job tech people, because that's one of the things we've heard. We want more tech along the highway.
We do need to attract more
Mhm.
businesses with high ticket items.
Yes, we
lots of
absolutely do.
jobs.
Absolutely. But I'm
I
just
think it's
saying
a
that,
Great idea.
but I think we have to look. Good.
No,
Sorry.
I just didn't know, I don't know what Vineyard's plan is for that property.
Mostly housing.
We'll look at it.
Mostly housing.
Madeline,
And our
Yeah.
water,
if I could,
Huh?
and our
Oh.
water.
you're good.
Great.
I think it was in 2018 or following 28, around that time, there was an EPA grant that we did an area-wide plan of Geneva Road. And that forecasted certain recommendations for the city to consider. I was tasked with that project and then I just told them, I said, I think we need to wait. Need to wait for what we see happening across the street of Geneva Road, to see what builds out from Vineyard. And then the city can kind of consider forming a special committee with property owners along there to discuss what that looks like and envision what that could look like. Because that is going to be inform that builds out, those property owners are going to say, hey, Orem, I want to do something with my property. And that's the opportunity, we want to get ahead of that before, through involving them some early discussions, right? And saying, what does this future of this corridor look like when this happens, right? And so that's some early discussions we've had. One consideration we had already considered, and it's just hasn't gone anywhere, was with the C2 zone, taking certain uses and adding it as a use, allowed use in the that's currently zoned M2. So, but that would have been a general plan amendment as well. And so this is, I think, another opportunity for that discussion to be had.
Yeah.
So,
Because I think between the industrial and commercial, some of the mixed uses that could be put in there, I think I think it's a great way to do tech jobs and other things that I think.
Yeah.
I'm
So,
agreeing with you. I'm sorry.
if
It's
you go
getting late.
back to orem.gov/long range planning, there should be the area-wide plan documents or maps that you can take a look at for your reference as well as part of this discussion.
And I think that also goes back to the need for more fine grained. I think we need more than C1, C2, and C3. I think
In industrial, there's even fewer. CM, which is controlled manufacturing, which probably looks a lot like C3, super light industrial. M1, BP and PD, and then M1 and M2 in heavy manufacturing in the industrial category.
how much M1 and M2 do we have?
Quite a bit. M2 is pretty extensive. There's a lot of M2 land.
M2 is pretty much Geneva Freeway.
It probably makes up the bulk of the industrial
Along Geneva.
categories.
The light pink.
It's like the future. We just have the future map. So, but that's where it is on the future map.
It's the mountain land, it's the HVAC, it's standard plumbing. It's all
Yeah,
that
it's all
stuff.
them out there.
Yep.
But we still have we have Geneva Pipe, we have a bunch of others that are still full industrial.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Geneva Pipe, that's in Orem, that's Linden.
It's in an Orem. It's
I may be thinking about.
So this is the future map. We have asked if we can
What-
get
why
the
not?
current
Sure, they
zoning
make the
map.
concrete.
Because you can get it online and you can kind of figure out, but we need another one like this.
A paper version of zoning.
Yeah, I
I
think-
forgot that we were going to do that for this. I'm sorry.
we still
Yeah,
have
it's
a couple
okay.
junkyard
We'll do
plants.
those.
But that one would be really useful too.
Yeah, definitely. Especially we're going to have this year-long process. It'd be good to be able to reference it.
Brackmans?
So those are the industrial categories, and we probably need to we'll do the same thing with the C1, with all the commercial ones. We'll kind of look at them and be able to tell you, are these so similar, or what are the significant differences between them?
Used to
It's
know
easy
them all,
breakdown.
used to go to
And then we
the
can
website.
decide, do we skip them together, or do we need more than those?
They're just not the same.
The last
Unfortunately.
category of the four that they listed
Same
in the
logic.
beginning of that section is mixed-use districts.
Commodity
Those
price
were
ticket
added as
parks.
part of the State Street Districts
Just-
plan, the 2015, 2016 plan.
Obama screwed them all.
They're not mapped or anything right now, but that's what we have. So,
Stinking commie.
yeah, the hub, the arts district, et cetera, those were the mixed-use districts. They didn't end up on the land use map, but they were created for it.
It's
So they're in the
obvious
code
we
or in the
Ain't even kind of. a-
Hold on,
text.
guys. You can't hear.
So,
Anyway. So, you were saying mixed use exists in here, but there is no place because we eliminated State Street that is considered mixed use.
right, it exists as a category in the text, but it's not mapped anywhere at all. So there's nothing else to say, and it doesn't actually call out any zones for it either, because it was just refers to that State Street plan. That's all it says. So
Should we reject it?
No, we don't have to have mixed use.
Yeah.
I mean, the state will probably
It's-
push us to have
Mixed
it.
use commercial. could
Mixed use
be-
commercial would,
Could
I
be
think,
something to consider.
I think that's something we do need to consider.
I do have a point on the mixed use thing,
Yeah.
that some of the intention behind it was to develop more of a walkable
Yeah, I
space
know.
around mixed use, which this has been the fight of Orem since we don't have an actual downtown. And I think the city's kind of pioneered something great with the building to start making some form of shape. I would say it's worth a small discussion, nothing extensive, but it's whether it's commercial mixed use or just some sort of, I think the idea of the arts district and all the things they put in there, it was just gonna cost more money than the benefits gonna bring. And at the time, that mixed use district idea was also used to push some businesses out of that location. There was 181 names that somebody did not like in those businesses. So I still have that list if you guys want to see the names and the person that put it together. So yeah, sure. That's so that's where there. So some of it was used as levers, and some of it was actually great idea. So I think we should give it a small convo to see if this is where the city wants to go. Go ahead.
Yeah, just to tail off that too, when I was referring to this Geneva Road corridor and area-wide plan, we were researching industrial commercial mixed use, and other various types of mixed use zoning that exists around the country that would support what exists there along Geneva Road right now, but then complement an addition of mixed use commercial, industrial, or light manufacturing, et cetera. So just to throw that out as well as for the existing categories, this mixed use category could apply to commercial and industrial.
I think that's definitely worth considering. And I know over time you've brought that up, Haysam, about the need for both and fixing it together.
And look, I now hope that the people that will live at the Canyon Tech Park that now become R8 will work at the offices there. That would be some sort of an idea of the two.
Okay. No, you're good.
In the drafts that we do, sorry. So I'm just making some notes so I can make sure I get this in the drafts that we get put out. All right, those are great thoughts. That's the last of my slides. We go
Okay.
back.
There was one other thing in this section that was annexation. And so I was wondering
Yeah.
about that. Is there any more land that the city, I mean, we have to have an annexation section, don't we?
We
Or
are
some comment about it?
required to have an annexation policy, and the city has, we don't have to have it in the general plan, but the city thus far has elected to have the annexation policy be contained in the general plan.
Yeah. And then is there more land that we're looking at annexing?
The biggest area of
That's still
land
there.
is
That's still there.
southwest of the temple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Lakeview annexation.
So
everything
if
that
you
map
go
goes.
from sort of where the new temple is, southwest to the lake, not all the way to the lake, but to where the wetlands start.
Yeah.
Does it go 2,000 south straight to the lake essentially?
2000 south. Yeah, there's a portion down that's already annexed in, so, but any agricultural acreage between 2000 south and the temple west of Geneva, before you hit wetlands, is pretty much the annexation plan. There's a few other little pockets in the annexation plan of industrial ground and.
Well, it says there's some in Carterville Road area.
You're looking at,
Yeah, I think a lot of that. Yeah, that red map there.
Carterville.
And some of that's been cleaned up, that little red triangle, we cleaned that up.
Then Sand Hill
This
Road, there was
year,
some there
actually.
too, as I remember.
I'm not sure about that other little,
This is the Sand Hill annexation area.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, that's the industrial I was referring to.
Yeah.
That's between the freeway and.
That's right by the Wilkerson
railroad
Farms.
tracks.
isn't it?
Railroad tracks.
And it's part of the county, but it's not part of
Yeah.
the city.
And there's not a lot of huge incentive for us to actually move forward with that. Especially as we're part of an annexation, we're required to show that we can demonstrate services to
There's
the
not a lot
area.
of drive by the owners
Okay.
to be
But-
included either, so.
No.
Well, and getting services there would be difficult.
Well, what they use it for,
Are
they would be limited in their usage the way they're using it now based on zoning. So
What's it
Yeah.
used for now? Do you know
So
if it's
sometimes
storage?
it's in our plan
Yeah.
because one day it may make sense, but
Yeah.
right now it may not. And yeah, the only other area that I can't quite tell you about is that little finger shaped piece in red. But the little triangle's been resolved this year. They
Yeah,
did
I
a
remember
municipal
they did
boundary line
that.
adjustment to fix that.
Hmm.
And that just went straight to council.
we can look at that stuff and see if there's other areas. I don't know that there are, there's not a lot of unincorporated county areas.
No,
still
that's, and
counted.
that's what I was like,
What is
really,
it?
how much is left to
Porta potty
annex?
Well,
business,
you
right?
could make a play, I mean, you have to consider history. You could make a play to annex parts of Vineyard if you want to invade. But other than that, this is probably your annexation policy.
Well,
think we're
yeah,
good.
and that green piece though is probably a substantial
Yeah.
future
It's a
area
significant
that
area.
needs to be
We
paid
should
attention to. And as you
have
look at
this.
land use,
Mhm.
think about what the
What-
future land use of that area, even though it's outside the city, the land use map becomes the default zoning for when it is annexed.
Right.
Mhm.
We're supposed to
Unless they
have it there.
specifically make another action.
Okay, that's a very good point. Is that what where we want our agriculture, or where do we want this out there?
Well, I talked to the owners of that. That's, why they stay the county is because they don't want pressure from the city to get rid of their farmland.
Well,
I
and
could
you know, as
see
a
this
private
happening.
property owner, we're not going to come in and pressure them to stop farming
That's not always true.
as a city. You know, usually it's the development community coming to them and making a purchase offer.
That's not always true.
But
In my experience, I haven't seen that.
What did you say again that, Matt, say that again?
It's not very often the city will come in and pressure. They may make an offer for property if they're buying a park or some other need. So I'm not sure what the word pressure means. I mean, if a city comes in and makes a purchase offer for property, that's the same as if anybody else came and made a purchase offer for property in an area.
Those areas are I don't think that you're gonna see a bunch of other unincorporated county that we would want to add to that mapping, but we can look and just make certain.
Any place maybe up in the canyon, right?
Yeah, and we're already
We're
part way
border.
up the canyon.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only thing I think of is
Yeah.
that if there was
Yeah.
some spots where
And
the the city might benefit from doing some
Yeah.
more municipal services or whatever.
yeah.
My knowledge, it's all Forest Service or federal or Provo City at that point, or state
Yeah.
land, state or federal, or it's Provo.
We don't want the canyon at all, do we?
Yeah.
Just,
we do.
just right at the mouth, just,
Yeah, look,
The little
right here.
arm, the Orem kind
Tupperware
of
Park up there, we've got,
shape.
just right at the first turn, really. your
The
first
water
right
district
turn.
stuff up there.
Well, I think, and what Jared was saying with Vineyard, I think there's some room in Pleasant Grove that we can take.
We need an aggressive invasion plan for other cities. We might as well. Let's have,
We need it.
So what's
Orem's manifest destiny.
what's the status of Utah City? Do we hear anything about Utah City?
that's a good question. I don't really know, to
I
be
don't
honest.
either.
I haven't heard more.
I mean, it's
lately.
such a major project that if it materializes, it'll have a profound impact on us, but is it gonna happen?
I think that's part of what Madeline's talking about with
Yeah.
Vineyard. We need to be aware of what's going on with Vineyard so that we can, whether we're moving to block or counter or profit from or whatever, any sales tax we can take from Vineyard,
Yeah.
I think we should take. I'm beating up on Vineyard a lot, but
I want to charge them congestion fees.
yeah.
I think that's a good idea.
There you, why
You're
not?
gonna
On that
use our,
road.
I know, you're gonna use our exit?
So we'll
Sadly.
get
come
into
through.
that and
Yeah.
find out where they are. We'll make the calls and ask the questions and talk to the planners in Vineyard and see where they are, so we can make educated
So is
decisions
it,
about what we're
is it
doing.
part of Vineyard now? Is it
Utah City, is it being,
It'll
always be part of Vineyard?
Yes.
That's why it's the dumbest name ever created.
Yes, cause
'Cause
it's this.
It's a neighborhood inside of a city.
Okay,
yeah, called Utah.
Yeah, called Utah City,
Utah City.
inside the city of Vineyard.
Utah City, Utah County, Utah.
I hope they name one of the streets
it's-
Vineyard Street. That would be good.
It's Utah County,
Yep.
Vineyard City,
Utah
Utah
City.
City, which is just a neighborhood inside of Vineyard.
Yeah.
It's the dumbest name ever.
Yes, it is. I agree.
Yeah, but
That's
No.
true. too.
Big
I always
Well,
struggled,
maybe not the dumbest.
but I always struggled with Utah County and Utah as a state because I lived out of state. I was born in Provo, but I lived out of state for most of my life. And I remember in high school having an argument with my, like, somebody in the office because they're like, I'm like, it's Provo, Utah, Utah. And they're like, that's ridiculous. There's no, I'm like, it's Provo, Utah, Utah. So yes, Utah City, Utah County, Utah.
Well, it wouldn't even be dumb if they renamed the town Utah City, but they didn't rename the town. They just
Just
called the
wrote by the
neighborhood
neighborhood.
Utah
That's it.
City.
Yeah.
It-
We'll
Yeah.
find
it
out.
helps
I'm
them
not
get
sure
things
when it's on.
approved.
It'll catch on as
It'll-
one of the dumbest things.
You know what? There was a city that decided to name itself Orem to get funding. No, I'm just kidding.
But at
Okay.
least it's unique. and
At least
not
it's
find out
unique.
what
I
his schedule
agree.
is, Jim.
I agree. But I'm just saying, when you name things to get funding, it doesn't
Well,
always work
that's
out.
like changing Geneva Heights to Orem City.
It just,
That would just be stupid.
so, okay.
Good question.
So is that some high level stuff to start thinking
That really helps us
through?
out a lot, yeah.
Okay.
And then, like I say, we'll be able to share the documents as we go now, after tomorrow morning, so we'll get them as we draft stuff for the land use, and as we finish a final draft for the intro, we'll put that out first. And then the drafts of the land use we'll hope to have out before the meeting, a few days before, so you can make some comments and start looking at it, thinking about it.
Okay. Is there's anything else? If there's not anything else on land use, then hey, I'm trying to end the meeting over here. So if there's
I'd
nothing
like
else
to
on
make
land
a
use.
motion.
I don't even have to make a motion. I just get to end it. This is just a work session. So then if
But
there's
I
a
just-
grant, do you
one
have
more
anything
thing.
else? Yeah.
So, I apologize, I didn't mean to shout. So just next steps, we, just so we can continue with our preparation for presentations and whatnot. There was this early draft of this full timeline. I'm going to update these touch points on the bottom blue arrows to the order that we've agreed upon in the intro. Unless you want to discuss them in any other order, I'm going to use that order as the introduction suggests. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Just so I can be consistent and plan ahead and get
'Cause-
some of these early drafts done and preparation done.
Yeah. The next
um,
thing I have is redevelopment.
Yeah.
Is that, okay. I just want to make sure we were
Yeah.
on the same
So
page.
I'm generally using these as a kind of a block template to help me and help you. And so that's why I kind of had suggested here, May 7th, redevelopment, May 21st, economics. And
So
then
April, is it 19 or whatever our next?
April
is?
16th.
Would we just do
we
land
can
use
go
again?
We can do land use again. We'll go
Okay.
through comments. We'll have a draft
Okay.
for you to review.
To be
Alright.
clear, if we're not done with land use on April 16th, that doesn't mean that I think we should still start redevelopment on the 7th.
I agree.
Even if we're still working land use. We move on to the next one and make sure we're drafting that too, so that we stay on schedule. Is that okay with everybody? We'll have to double you up, but
From my
Unless we get
experience,
too piled up.
yeah, we'll see how
At
bad
some
we
point,
get.
you have to
At
reach
4,
out.
we'll
Or
have
we
to
have,
take
or
a
we have another
pause.
meeting. We have a off
Well,
cycle
that's fine too.
work session.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. as
Do
I
we
well.
have
was
a
just
date
gonna
for the
s-
city council?
For our meeting with the city council, he had said it was the 13th of May.
I want to say it's 13th of May, yeah, and it's not exclusive to the general plan, but I'm sure it'll come up.
Yeah.
So,
I
yeah,
mean, I think-
13th of May.
Some of this land use stuff is good things to discuss. with
It's gonna come up, I'm sure.
and I was just going to add, from my experience, land use kind of collates all of these things together. We're going to be talking about land use through all the rest of these topics. So that'll inform or continue to inform their discussion, and then the other discussions will inform others. It's how it ties together. So
And I think kind of like, oh dear, I just forgot my thought. But we'll keep coming back. And I think if we're not fully done, other things we do will, will get us to come back and fix things because we'll be doing that all the way through. So, okay, anything else before we close? Okay, then we adjourn this work session at 6:52 PM. Waiting to be done.